fight. We don't have to kill. Everybody in the whole wide world really just needs to chill. No, we don't have to fuss, no, we don't have to fight.
Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of Just Chill with Oliver George. This is episode number 43, and we've actually got two guests this week, but before we get to them, I want to remind you, if you're watching this on YouTube right now, and you would prefer audio only for whatever reason, you can access that on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and other places like that. Contrary to that, however, if you're listening to me right now and you didn't realize there was a visual side to this show, then please come check it out on YouTube. However you choose to enjoy the episode, I would really appreciate it if you would subscribe, like, follow, share, whatever the case may be on the platform that you are using. It really helps me to keep growing this show, and I do truly appreciate your support. So if you've already subscribed, thank you so much. Finally, if you want to hit me up, maybe with a cool guest idea or some general feedback, you can reach me at justchillpodcasting@gmail.com. Now, the guests for this week were JF Frenette and Scott Brown, two local comedians and filmmakers who have created this great documentary called Comedy 19, The Last Laugh. It's about to be released to everybody on March 5th, so really looking forward to that. But I saw this, I'm featured in this. There's so many great comedians that you get to hear their perspectives on just what exactly COVID has done to the comedy industry in Canada. It's really, really a great film, so I hope you all check it out when it comes out. But before that, enjoy this great talk that we had where we talked about the film, obviously, but we also spoke about many things from crazy jobs we've had in the past to Scott telling us about the time he almost died while on vacation. It was just a really great, I think it was almost 2 hours, a really great long chat with a couple of good friends. So I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. Thank you so much.
So what's up, dudes? That's, how are you guys doing first off?
Great, man. Thanks for having us on the show.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Doing fantastic.
Well, I remember last time I spoke to you last week, you had just like mangled your car in a bit of an incident.
Yeah. I'm just going to make sure I got my, Facebook is turned off, I think. So I don't have to worry.
I guess this is a podcast when you ask us like, how are you doing? And you don't expect just to be like, fine. Like, oh, okay, let's talk about like all the shit that we're going through right now, you know?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, that's
like
interesting to explore too. I'd be down to go down that avenue.
Yeah. Talk about.
Well, actually, when I came on your show back in the fall, we talked a lot about mental health. I think it's a good thing to talk about, and the pandemic has definitely been taking its toll on people in a lot of those areas. And I know personal friends of mine that I've already lost to situations like that during the COVID period that were not COVID related, but I think were rooted in mental health and addiction issues and stuff. So I'm, If I ask you how are you doing and you want to really give her and open up, we can definitely go down.
Yeah.
Kind of weird, actually. I've definitely like worked hard to get to where I am, but considering like how I've just had this like really shitty, as I say, bad things happen in threes, right? Well, I had my big three things, and it was like, I'm actually doing a lot better than I probably would have been a couple of years ago. So I'm kind of proud of myself for that.
What were the big three?
I got laid off my job, and then my brother tried to kill himself, and then I had the car accident. It's like all in like 2 weeks.
Damn. Yeah, I remember you telling me about both those things. That's fucked up, man. Well, I hope your brother's on the road to recovery from that situation, and I'm very happy.
Yeah, slowly but surely. Yeah. My parents ended up going back out to PEI. They were there from like July until New Year's. And they came back to London, Ontario, and they were back for barely like a month and a half. And then they just ended up having to go right back.
Well, it's a dark time to be living in. It's easy to lose yourself in all the chaos of the way things are headed right now. And hopefully not for that much longer, but no one really knows. The uncertainty is a big part of it too. I think everyone just feels like they're stuck in this never ending, calamity.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, like I know that he is, I know he always has been kind of a troubled kid, but, he's actually a really good father. I mean, all things considered, I'm kind of surprised at how I never would have thought he would have been such a good dad. But I think now that his kids has kind of got into the terrible, just got past the terrible twos into the threes and stuff. I think now he's not as accustomed to dealing with that,
Yeah. Well, kids, every year there's new stuff. You got to keep adapting for sure. It could be a stressor. Anyways, well, I mean, that all ties into part of the reason I'm interviewing you guys right now, which is because of the film that you guys have created, which is going to be premiering soon and then eventually being released to the public later that week. So there's so much going on with this film. I really want to just explore everything about it. But can you explain just in general for people who have no idea about your film, which I should say is called COVID-19, The Last Laugh. But if you can give kind of the pitch and explain what the film's about for people that are unfamiliar.
It was actually, sorry, Comedy 19.
Oh, Jesus, I said COVID-19. My bad. Comedy 19.
Andra, you know, that was the play on COVID, but
yeah, no, I butchered that. My bad.
Well, I mean, for the most part, I mean, it's, I guess in a certain way, a little bit self-explanatory, but just about how it's about, you know, comedy and what's been going on in the lives of club owners and comedians and just everybody that's involved in the Canadian comedy community pretty much from March until this year, you know, and all the different lockdowns and like what it's done to, you know, the ability for people to do comedy, what comedians are doing to like evolve, you know, like there's a lot of these outdoor shows and Zoom shows and, you know, people just finding just different methods of doing comedy to adapt. So, you know, it's kind of got a good twist of, you know, sad, depressing stuff with also some optimistic, hopeful stuff about, you know, what people are willing to do and prepared to do to, you know, keep comedy alive. And I think that it leaves viewers with a good sense of optimism, but also wants to carry the message that, you know, like things are still on thin ice, you know, and that we really need people to do what they can to support comedy because it really can disappear very easily. And a lot of bars and clubs can very easily go out of business right now after these lockdowns. And, you know, what does that do for people, especially in a pandemic who really need, you know, to stay positive and stay in good spirits? You know, comedy is more important now than ever, right?
Yeah, definitely. And a lot of people are really struggling, especially people who that was their paycheck, people who were regular working comics, you know. Those people are being hit the hardest. There's a lot of people like me who kind of dabble in comedy, but it's not my main source of income. You know, it's not what I do. So I really feel for those people who their livelihoods were just ripped away from them, you know. And a great point that Michael Lifshitz makes in your film was about how it's ridiculous that comedy, well, this is more of a funding thing, but how comedy doesn't get the same respect as like theater and stuff like that, where if you were to take your comedy bit and go do it and present it as a one-man show, all of a sudden you might get funding from the government to help you out because now it's theater. I thought that was a really interesting takeaway from the film.
Yeah, I know. It's kind of redundant in a way how it's like, you know, they basically are, there's a very thin line between the two of them, but it's just the way that it's seen in the eyes of the government. But like there's a lot going on with Cask. You know, the Canadian Association of Stand-Up Comics are definitely pushing forward. And I'm hoping that as well too, that the film can help bring light to that and have more like not comics, obviously, because everyone about that knows it. It's like the actual patrons of comedy that don't realize that comedy is not even an art form. Like a lot of people I've talked to have just said, oh, I didn't know that. I thought it was, you know, so they're really kind of oblivious to it. So
yeah, it doesn't get the respect it really deserves, even though
get no respect.
Yeah. Well, it's I don't see why it wouldn't classify as art. I mean, it's an expression, it's a performance, it's all those things that you would say about music or theater or whatever. And to be just sort of secluded from that is really hard to wrap your mind around.
Well, if I can chime in on that.
Of course, yeah.
Mark Breslin had a really cool point, and Jeremy Haas too, on that is like comedy was profitable. Like you could make a living from just doing comedy without any grants, without any funding from the government. It was like an industry. Whereas, you know, if you're doing, I don't know, contemporary dance or abstract art or something, and there might not be a market for that kind of stuff, you actually need some funding from the government to actually be able to make a living. But Jeremy Hotz was like, you know, who the fuck cares? Like if they don't call us an art, if they don't respect us, like we're still going to be comics, we're still going to do it. And there's something like a bit punk rock about that too, that
for sure
I admire. And so I thought there was and I think in the documentary you sort of captured different stances on that as well. I mean, for sure, it sounds like it'd be cool if we could get some funding for, especially if we want to do like a comedy special or travel. Like, you know, musicians get touring money sometimes from the government, from grants, and like the Ontario Arts Council, they'll give money to bands to go travel across Canada, and like that'd be great if we could get that as comedians. But you know, some of the guys were saying like you can actually do that and make a living already. because you're not paying 6 guys to play, like, you know, lug all your instruments. You're like just one guy, and you can take it.
Yeah, that's true.
You know.
Yeah, it's just you and the microphone. So yeah, it's a lot more simplistic in that sense and easier to just take it wherever you want. Yeah, that's a good point.
That's the whole, yeah, that's what I love about comedy too, is how democratic, like, it's just so accessible for anybody that has a notepad and a voice, and boom, you can get on stage.
Yeah, that's so true. A lot less hurdles to be able to feel like you're competing, or not, maybe that's the wrong word, but, you know, getting into that comedy arena and putting yourself out there.
Well, that's actually kind of how I started doing stand-up, was because, you know, like when things were not really the greatest for me with my old business, and I was just like working nonstop, and I was in a city, I didn't know people, you know, and I kind of fell out of my like musical groove. And I was like, you know, I don't really, there's a lot more work that goes into trying to get with a band and practice and play a show versus, you know, you could literally write a set and then like that same night go up and perform stand-up. So it's kind of, or you could even just wing it, you know, like it's a very different type of art form. So that was kind of what really drew me to it, is that it gave me the ability to kind of not replace music, because I mean, I still love music just as much as comedy, but it was a good bridge to still get out there and perform when music just didn't seem like an option, you know?
Yeah.
So, and that's one of the nice things, is that really, it's a really easy thing for anybody to do that doesn't really require the same exact, you know, you don't need like multiple people. But I think that's why people confuse it as an art form, is because, you know, a guy who's like really new can be up there and be really funny. And, you know, a guy who's been doing it for 10 years, you know, they can sound almost the same, you know? And I think that like practice with music or other art forms is a lot more noticeable when you've been doing it for 1 year, 2 year, 3 or 4 years, you know?
It's a lot easier to pick out the rookie. Yeah.
Yeah. But that's the beautiful thing about comedy too. I mean, there's a lot of guys that start doing comedy and they just kick ass right away.
Just
you know?
natural.
And yeah, exactly. You know, they've been doing comedy their whole life. They just didn't do it on stage, right?
Yeah. So when did you first try comedy? Or both of you guys, actually, that's a good question for both of you that I wanted to know. When did you both get into comedy?
For me, I tried in 2018, April 2018. So going on
almost 3 years, yeah.
And actually going back to like mental health and all that, I think when I look back on it, I think I was like in a depth of a depression, and I had sort of had this mindset of like, you know, just fuck it, I'm just gonna do whatever, and if my life gets so miserable, I'll just kill myself kind of deal. So it was almost like I'll just do. I always wanted to try stand-up comedy, and I was afraid of it, and now I was at a point where it's like, you know, fuck it, I don't care. I'll just
you felt like you had nothing to lose, really.
Yeah, nothing to lose, and it was very cathartic in that sense to actually face my fear, bomb hard. And like that was always my biggest fear, you know, it was like bombing in front of people and that feeling, all that. And it was terrible. It was fucking gave me anxiety for like 2 weeks. But having gotten over it, I'm like, now I can bomb. And, you know, I fucking bombed on Swizzles last Saturday, and I'm like, whatever. Another one in the books. You're like, you know.
Yeah. It makes you feel a little more like you can handle shit, and you don't have to be so torn apart by every little misstep. You can just kind of take it in stride and be like, whatever, you know, it's working towards the goal still.
Well, there's something about facing, like imagining when you have anxiety, you think of the worst, and then you actually live the worst, and then you come out of the end, you're like, you know what? My worst fear wasn't even that bad.
Yeah, I'm still here too.
Healing about that.
Yeah.
I think
I can definitely relate to what you said about trying stand-up, because you kind of just were at a super frustrated point where you just didn't even care, and the fear had no power over you anymore. Because I've said this on the show before, I didn't try stand-up until 9 months or something like that, maybe a year after I got divorced, and it was just like, you know, yeah, maybe it was a little longer than that, actually. It might have been a couple of years later, but it was 2015 when I first tried comedy, and it was, you know, a couple of years after I gotten divorced, and I finally just felt like I don't know if reborn is the word, but, you know, you go through something big like that, and then all of a sudden you feel kind of like it's a good reset point for the way that you view yourself and the things that you might be capable of. And you're maybe a little more willing, and you have that armor of just like not giving a fuck and kind of just being like, I'm almost 30. Like, I just got a divorce like a couple of years ago. Like, why the fuck not? And, you know, that's my own experience, that like trauma or tough situations can really be a good durability factor for what you're willing to go up against in the future, because you just feel a little bit like, okay, I went through that and I'm relatively unscathed. Let's see what this is going to do to me, you know? But yeah, so I can relate to that point.
There was a point where I remember like being at work after, you know, I have a desk job, government job, and I'm an economist by day, and being in meetings and having lost my filter. And like, because I was doing stand up, I was like, almost like now I just, you know, had nothing to lose. I was like joking, whatever, but saying shit that I probably wouldn't have said before in meetings. And I had to be careful, like, okay, this is like this is my hobby, this is my night persona. I can't like let that bleed in too much into my regular life. So that was an interesting thing that I noticed about doing stand-up, that how it changed my whole perspective of things, and how people sometimes, I'm like, what the fuck, like just say what you want, or say what you're thinking. And you know, people are so reserved sometimes, and like in work settings and meetings, people are super polite and like trying to be like,
very fake, honestly.
Yeah, very fake,
super
and,
phony.
I'm like, you know, I'm doing stand up at night, coming in for a meeting, you know, at 8-9 a.m. Like, what the fuck you talking? Like, you know, sort of like.
It is hard when you start doing stand up though to separate that. I mean, I guess some people they just walk on stage and they're themselves, but I think most people, it takes a while to get to that point. And when I first started, I remember thinking like the same thing, that it was like my alter ego. I would go on stage and I'd be a lot more open about some stuff. And, but I also remember being scared when I first started, because I was talking always about being a stoner and all these stoner jokes. And it was 2015. So weed wasn't legal yet. I had young kids. I was worried that like, if I posted my videos, someone was going to call CAS and be like, this guy's smoking weed and he has kids. And so whereas now, I mean, fuck, it's legal, so no one gives a shit anymore. But, yeah, I remember that. And then you see other people and the shit they talk about on stage. And I'm like, okay, there's nobody in the back of the room like writing all this down, making a report on you. And that's how I felt at the beginning. But then I'd see someone else talk about doing shrooms and going to the fair or something, another level up from weed. And I'm like, this guy doesn't give a shit. Maybe he doesn't have kids, but I don't know.
Also, how are you supposed to tell if it's, I mean, they could just be saying it.
Exactly.
I mean,
it could all be fabricated.
People just make shit up because it's fun.
Yeah. It could just be something they're doing on stage for the joke. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But it's weird. When I started stand up, I felt like everybody knew everything about my life. And like, you're so self-conscious, I guess, when you first start trying to go and do this thing, which is kind of vulnerable, with standing on stage and trying to get approval from a group of strangers, you know? So I guess I always felt like people could see everything about my life and they knew everything all about me, and they could tell if I was telling the truth or just making something up. And then you see enough comedy and you're like, okay, none of that's true. That's just my anxiety.
But like, I definitely started with fictional comedy at first, and I kind of slowly gravitated to more like diving into like, you know, storytelling about stuff that's happened in my life. But my first like probably 10 sets, everything about it was just completely made up. Like none of it was true.
Really, I always found that hard. I toyed with that and may have done it once or twice, but I always felt like I didn't like lying to the audience. That was part of what I liked about doing comedy, was just saying shit that's, you know, on my mind and real stuff that happened to me and stuff.
I mean, I wasn't lying. Like I have a joke, for example, like one of the jokes was because I was having like weird numbness in my like left arm and my leg. So like that was true, but I had like a story about going to the doctor, and like that's part of it was all fake, or even like
exaggerating a bit. Yeah.
Or even like the joke that a lot of people have heard, like where I talk about having this wet dream with Angela Langebert, like literally never had. Like I liked Murder, She Wrote. I watched it as a kid. From there, I made this completely made up wet dream story.
Yeah.
So like that's the thing, is I just, you know, so I'm not like trying to lie to the customer.
Well,
but
I didn't mean lying in like a negative sense either. There's people who could do a whole set that's all bullshit and it might crush and make everybody. I'm not trying to take away from that. It's just not something that I, whenever I do stage time, I always really enjoy that, you know, what I feel like is me connecting with the audience by revealing truths about my life or the way that I think about shit, you know?
Well, I know that JF definitely seemed to have a pretty good detailed visit with the doctor recently too, with that he's has a pretty funny joke about Jeff.
Oh, well, that's the weird part about comedy for me. I don't know, you're touching on that, Oliver, but I don't know about you, but I'm like a pretty private person in my real life.
With some things I am, yeah.
With some things, and then on stage, like I have like a 6 minutes about a colonoscopy that I had. Like I have never told my friends or family that I had a colonoscopy either, but
you'll tell strangers, yeah.
I'll tell strangers 6 minutes. Just thought,
It is
He's got
kind of
the camera feed on stage. He's got the whole recording.
The whole recording and the whole thing.
Oh, that's amazing. It is easier though, right, to reveal shit that you might be ashamed or a little shy about or whatever to strangers than it is to, like, if your mom's sitting in the front row or something. At least for me, that's what I've always found. When people I know and really respect their opinions are in the audience, then it makes me much more nervous because I'm like, oh, well, this motherfucker knows me and they're going to remember if I was shitty or not. Whereas a stranger is going to forget you pretty much after the show, unless you were amazing, you know?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. But
there's something, I watched the Patrice O'Neill documentary last night. Have you?
Oh, nice.
Killing is Easy. It's a new documentary, and his whole philosophy about being the truth, and like he was apparently like the same on stage, off stage, and on stage, and like just being completely honest and way too honest. Like Jim Norton says, like he shot himself in the foot so many times because he was just couldn't hold back. He couldn't like toe the line, and you just and I think there's something so beautiful about that. Like people who can be completely themselves on stage, and it's. You at one point you realize like you think, oh, this is my persona on stage, but maybe that persona is your true self, and your persona is like your society self is your actual persona that you've been
that's so interesting.
Yeah,
that's a good way to look at it, actually.
I mean, I don't know where it falls. I'd say it's different for every person too, but I do think it's really cool when there's somebody who is like the same on and off stage. I mean, I'm sure there's slight differences, but people like Bill Burr, I think that he's pretty close to who he is on stage. And there's probably a million other examples, but it's also nice. Some people that sort of have like characters that they slip into on stage. Like that's what I love about comedy too, is there's so many different ways to do it. And there's no like wrong way other than the way that doesn't get laughs. But as far as like your form, whether you want to be a prop comic or a musical comic or a straight, just observational comic like Seinfeld style or whatever the fuck your thing is, as long as you get people laughing, then you're not doing it wrong. Like, at least as far as I'm concerned.
I know that because you can have like 100 people in a room and have a variety of comics that are like the best comics. And like, each act will go completely different. So it's so much of it's audience based. So it's not even like, well, this person is or isn't funny. Like a lot of people love Bert Kreischer and a lot of people love Chris D'Elia and a lot of people love, and some people don't, like I'm not a huge Chris D'Elia guy. Obviously he's pretty popular. I don't particularly like Gabriel, Fluffy. But obviously he's doing something right because he's pretty famous. So, it's so like subjective. It's not even to say that's correct or not, just like music.
Well, I mean, with Chris D'Elia, you could have opinions about him personally too, and him grooming underage chicks.
It's not a good time to be a fan of Chris D'Elia right now.
But I saw something on Facebook. It was like him doing shows again or whatever. I don't remember, a few months ago. And like, whatever, if he's allowed, I guess. But it seems weird to me that people would want to go see his shows after finding out that kind of shit. Because his seemed kind of pretty conclusive that he had been like grooming underage chicks and being like super creep, basically.
Yeah.
So I don't know how you bounce back from that, but people seem to keep doing it. Like Brian Callen's performing again too, and he had a big scandal where some chick was accusing him of rape like 20 years ago and stuff like that. So I don't know. I mean, I guess you don't really know what really happened until it goes to court and shit like that, but it's crazy.
Yeah, it is pretty crazy.
It makes me wonder like how much other sort of like dark shit has gone down in the comedy community at large, because it seems to be, somewhat prevalent. There's enough comics that have been kind of getting in shit for that kind of stuff. And I can understand how the atmosphere would be conducive to that kind of behavior, and that it's usually at night and there's alcohol involved and there's a lot of hierarchy in comedy and people trying to, I don't know. And then there's a lot of damaged people to begin with who get into comedy who are very frail and maybe emotionally unstable in the first place. So, like Bill Cosby, geez, there's so many.
The way you say it, it is a recipe for disaster. Like,
yes, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
People in a bar at night, alcohol involved, drugs and everything, and the whole system. Yeah. It's just... Well,
and if we're going back decades, a very unbalanced equation when it came to like women in comedy and to a degree, like people of color and different sexualities. And luckily that's all opening up a lot more nowadays. But I can only imagine like the heyday of like the 80s or something like that. If you were a female comic, you probably instantly just had to work harder to get people's respect and or whatever the case may be. I'm glad to see that kind of shit changing for sure.
Not to mention copious amounts of cocaine.
Yeah. There's exactly. It's like the rock and roll lifestyle, especially back in the day too. I'm sure that it was a lot of drugs, not just alcohol, but like hard shit, you know?
Yeah.
Well, plus there's that fine line between like the movie industry and like if you get big enough, you know, a lot of those guys are still out there partying with, you know, like movie stars and musicians. So like you're still kind of mixing all those worlds.
Well, some of them became movie stars, right? Like people like Eddie Murphy and many other people like Robin Williams and, you know, comics that became amazing actors too, you know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, like I remember watching the Richard Pryor roast, and you see him doing a bump like right before he goes.
Oh yeah.
It's like right on.
Oh Jesus. But there was some. Didn't he fucking burn himself with cooking meth or something like that?
Oh yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, there's some story that he actually tells on stage when he's doing a comedy bit, and he talks about how I don't know, maybe it wasn't meth, maybe it was crack or something like that, but he was cooking some sort of homebrew drugs, and it like exploded and like lit his hair on fire and burned him and shit like that, and he put it into his act.
Hey, man, that's a good bit. You ever find yourself like doing shit now that like I'll say yes to things now that I'm like, I don't want to do it, but I might get a good bit out of this.
Yeah. Weird situations and scenarios for sure. Yeah,
I gotta figure out a good way to make a bit of my my near death experience in Punta Cana, because, you know, I mean, there's so much there. I just don't know how to make it funny yet, because it was the most terrifying experience of my life. But I'm sure eventually.
This sounds like a story you now have to sort of explain a bit further.
Yeah, I don't mind. I'm saying I don't know how to make it funny yet, but there's this dance club. There's a dance club in Punta Cana called Imagine, and it's this like sweet underground cavern. Like you go into this giant like rock building, and then they just basically dug into it, and underneath you're like literally like in a big cave, and they've turned it into a dance club. It was pretty sweet, you know.
That's cool.
The bus picks you up from the resort, and you know it's like a flat fee. You pay, go there, dance the whole night. You know, bottle service. And so then they pick you up at like 2 or 3 a.m. or something like that, and they bring you back. But one of the guys that I was with that was there, you know, he just kind of like befriended some people that were they're from Chicago. They had an Airbnb that they were renting for like a month. So they were not on a resort. They just went there because they were like off, you know, they're near the water, and they had this like nice villa, and it seemed nice because I mean it was a like a nice high end place, like it was gated and everything. Nice. But the problem is that now it's like 4 a.m, and you know we did something that we should never do, which was get into a Jeep with this guy driving, and he was hammered. I mean, he was more than shit faced. Like I mean, he was obviously doing drugs too. And anyway, it was a fun night up until this moment where we were like, yeah, okay, well, we don't want to split up. Well, I guess we're going to this guy's place for like an after party. Just to give you an example, we get in this Jeep. The first thing the guy does is pull out a machete and just scares the shit out of us. He's just like, you know, we're like, what the fuck, right? But like, this is one of those things where like he's driving, drops his phone on the ground, and he's just like, oh, where did my phone go? You know, and you're just like, look at the road. And then like he would swerve and like go up on the curb, and then like he would start yelling with his girlfriend, and we're just like, pay attention. Like he almost like hit cars. And it was just like he was driving this rental, so he was just booking it. He just didn't give a shit about the vehicle going so fast over speed bumps. The morning after driving back, like he almost hit guys on motorcycles. Like it was just the most terrifying drive of my life, you know, and like literally like it was one of those moments.
This guy sounds like an asshole.
We just all got out, kissed the ground. Like we actually thought we were going to die. We're like, I've never been in a car in my life that just, I actually thought was going to crash at like 100 fucking miles an hour. Like it was just crazy how fast he was going. And, you know, I mean, the reason that we were in there is because we just want to make sure we all didn't separate. We, you know, plus we missed the bus, and it was like, oh, whatever, let's just go and, you know, YOLO. But in hindsight, it was a horrible idea.
Yeah. YOLO. No.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's fucking crazy. Even him pulling out a machete, I would already be like, okay, this was a bad decision. Like before he even hits the gas pedal. Oh man, that is a crazy story. But going back to what JF was saying about, you know, approaching weird situations that they might be a good comedy bit. I think that's just a good way to approach life, to try to have a healthy mindset in general. That like, I read in Pete Holmes' book, him talking about this, and it was something I had done many times in my life. So it was cool to read someone else talking about that, in that you kind of just pretend like every day of your life is like an episode on like a TV show that's about you. which sounds a little narcissistic and ego, but, because then it doesn't have to be good or bad. It's just like, what's going to happen to JF in this episode, and you just kind of roll with it a little more.
Well, that's the thing is, so I would like comedies change my mindset about negative experiences, right?
Yeah.
It's like, you can have a negative experience now, but at least I put a twist on it. I'm like, well, this might be a bit. So it's completely changed my mindset about it. It's the same thing like this winter. Well, I've been doing kiteboarding for a number of years now, but I got back into it more this winter. And for kiteboarding, so basically you have a giant kite, you go on like a Britannia, and it's during the winter on the ice with the snowboard and all that.
Oh, weird.
And you need to have like really strong wind, and it's usually at really cold days. So in the winter, when it's cold and windy, even if I'm not kiteboarding, I'm still happy because I'm like, oh, this is great kiteboarding weather. But that changed like my mindset about winter. Like I don't see winter at all anymore, right? Like usually if I'd be like, oh, this is cold and windy, it's like, oh, miserable. But now I'm actually happy about those days.
Yeah, I actually know a couple buddies who are super into snowboarding, and that's how I've always felt. It's like it's shitty and cold outside, and I'm like, oh man, I don't even want to go out there. And they're like, let's go build a jump, and they're like super stoked to have that weather. So it's all about your perspective, really. Yeah.
But you can't.
You have to make time. Like you have a hobby. That makes it worth it. If you just have to just suck up winter and shovel snow and deal with the crappy stuff, then there's no fun out of it. But there's a lot of good things you can do as long as you just make time for it.
Well, and dressing properly is something that, like, if you're lazy about how you approach winter, you pay for it. Like when I go out now, even just to walk the dogs on a cold day or whatever, I put like double layered socks, throw the long johns on because it makes such a huge difference. Just layers. And then you're like, man, it's not that bad. My cheeks are a little cold, but I could go for like a nice walk now, And I feel like when I was younger, I was always just like lazy, leaving things to last minute, going out with like really underprepared clothing wise, and then bitching at the winter for being winter,
Although there's a good solution now to the cheeks, because everyone's wearing fucking masks.
True, yeah. Well, and also something that I've said I'm grateful for about masks is that I haven't been fucking sick since pre-pandemic, like at all.
I know, isn't it amazing?
It's crazy, yeah.
Usually, because I have 2 young kids, and like they would bring home so many colds and whatnot, and like we would be always sick. But now this year, like knock on wood, but like,
are they in virtual school?
No, they're in school. So, well, for January for this lockdown, they were, I was homeschooling one of them, but.
Yeah, because my older 2 have been in virtual school since, I guess, whenever they first decided that. And just because it worked well for us, their grades are as good, if not better. And then they're not going to school and mingling with other kids, possibly spreading germs around and shit. So, I haven't minded that, really, to be honest. It's nice not to have to, drive out to the school in the morning on a snowy day and scrape the car off and shit. It's just,
I will say, actually, I sort of miss January's virtual schooling because I was helping my son for virtual school and all that. And then we would take he would have breaks and we would like take breaks together. And I was like his recess buddy,
Oh, nice. That's adorable.
Yeah. So we had like 20 minutes. Like, all right, let's go build a fort outside or something, or let's go play chess or whatever.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So now I'm like,
meanwhile, I have my buddy Tyler over and we're just like drinking beer at 3 p.m, jamming.
Yeah, that's good too. That sounds like a good time.
That's your recess buddy, Tyler.
Yeah, exactly. Hashtag no kids.
Yeah.
That's in high school though. You're smoking weed under the bleachers. I'm like doing super innocent things. Yeah.
See, my high school though, we didn't have bleachers. We just had like a pit because there's this huge forest next to the school.
Okay.
So there's no bleachers anywhere. So we just like got right off school property and just went deep into the woods. And there's like this little like area that like people put logs and everything. And it was
that's funny. When we had the stoner group at my school, it was always in the path, which was like this path that was just across the street, across school property, that it was literally like one of those little paths you find between like, a cul-de-sac or someplace where there's residential houses. And then there's a little path that leads to maybe a slightly busier street. It's that little path. So there's backyards on either side of it. And I'm sure those people hated the kids that went there every day and puffed the huge reefer smoke clouds, But we moved there because I remember being in grade 9 or 10 and there was a dumpster much closer to school property, sort of near the smoking section, just a little bit away from that. And the principal at the time hired somebody or I don't know if he paid them, but he got in cahoots with someone that lived in the apartment complex and had them filming us, which the kids then went and like got on the news, if I remember correctly, for like, hey, our fucking school is filming us without our permission with like civilians from this residential place. And I think I don't know if they got in big trouble, but they definitely stopped doing it. and we moved to the path just to be safe. But man, what a weird memory. I just totally, that all came flooding back to me right now.
I know, isn't it so weird? We actually had a narc. I remember, like, in the actual, like, you know, somebody who's, in hindsight, he was probably like maybe 20, and we were all like, you know, 15, 16, whatever, but he looked young, and he was like this paid narc to be around people smoking weed and like busting people. It was like, what a
so
weird. Like, imagine being 20 and that's your job. Like,
Yeah.
you're going back to high school and like being actual.
Dude, I did secret shopper shit for, I don't know, a month or something, where you pretend that you're shopping and you're actually spying on people and trying to catch shoplifters. It's the weirdest. First of all, it's really boring because you're just like fake shopping for 8 hours or whatever, and it gets old real quick. But yeah, you just feel like kind of a dick. And not to say shoplifting is right or anything, but it's a weird thing to be getting paid to do, for sure.
Well, they had those people that would get paid. They were underage and they would go get paid to go ask for cigarettes in convenience stores.
Oh, shit.
But then what they would do is they would take you to different towns so that, you know, people didn't know you and all that. But you feel like you feel like a narc as you are. Basically.
That's still a weird job. Yeah, I'm not saying it's not a good thing. I suppose it catches
Sure,
people.
good gigs, probably pays well if you're 16, whatever, and you look like 20, you know.
Well, that's an interesting thing to ask you guys then. What's the weirdest or worst job that you guys have ever had?
Oh, that's a long list. Weirdest job.
Well, yeah, whatever. Just pick one that you think would be fun to talk about now. You know,
I worked at a cheese factory with another Scott Brown. So there were two Scott Browns making cheese. It was
that's hilarious.
Second job. Yeah.
What, like St. Albert's or whatever? The poutine?
No, this was out in the Huron County. Do you know where like Owen Sound, Kincardine area is? Like the
vaguely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like there's the Bruce Power Plant, which is like it's this massive nuclear power plant that does like a huge amount of Ontario. So it's in that general area on Lake Huron. And it's a little place called Pine River. It's like an independent kind of, like, a lot of it was like manual labor, as opposed to if you go to craft, you're going to get like a lot more machines being done. So people always ask me like, oh yeah, do you guys make cheese curds? I'm going to go ahead and say this. All cheese that you buy, cheese curds happens in the process. So all cheese was cheese curds at some point. Like it's part of like how they separate the whey and it curdles. And what we would do is there's this like thing that would kind of like go through this gigantic like 100-foot bathtub type of thing, and it would separate the cheese as it would curdle from the whey, and the whey would go off and get put in tanks and then go off to make butter and whatnot. So then what would happen is we would then use these big rakes. So imagine like this like super long bathtub, and one guy's on one side, one guy's on the other, and like from the middle,
both named Scott Brown.
We're parting the cheese like this, and it's like, and then it just kind of like starts to mesh into each other, and then you let it like all the weight settle and it turns into this big blob, and then we'd use these like slicers and we would be cutting the cheese, of course, which is a non-stop pun, right? Someone like the manager to walk in and be like, hey, who cut the cheese? Like, you know,
oh my god, for the 400th day in a row.
And I couldn't shit for weeks. This way too much free cheese. Like it was bad, you know. Like
how are you guys today? You feeling Gouda? You know, like all the cheese puns. You could go all day with that shit.
Well, actually, we had a Christmas party. They had like a contest for who can come up with the cheesiest joke that I won. Because there was this old guy that had been there for like, you know, like forever and a day. His name was Lloyd, and he just like never did anything. He was like really knackered and just like feeble. But I think it was just like this like courtesy to keep him on, even though like his productivity was like, you know, he just had like that job that like anybody could do, but they're just like, yeah, we're just gonna, you know, keep him on for, you know, loyalty's sake, which is a nice thing when you consider how most factories work. So it was like an ongoing joke. It was like, hey, you know, Lloyd, nice of you to show up. You're gonna start working anytime soon. So I had a joke, which was, what do you call it when Lloyd shows up to work? Loitering. Apparently, and I won the joke contest. That's how
has
good.
Nothing to do with cheese.
Yeah,
has nothing to do with
other than it being a cheesy joke.
Yeah, well, it wasn't a joke about cheese. It was just a cheesy joke. Yeah.
Well, and he works at the cheese factory, so technically it's sort of about cheese, I guess. But I thought you were going to give us a really good cheese joke there.
No. I kind of like felt it was just overdone, so I was kind of like I was just sick of cheese and cheese jokes by the time I was done there. You know.
Yeah. I was not expecting you to say that you worked at a cheese factory with another Scott Brown. That's definitely a great story.
Did it pay well? Did you make a lot of cheddar? No, I'm kidding.
I made like $1 above minimum wage, I think, at the time. So like whatever, like $8.
Oh,
It would be amazing if your manager's name was Bree. Anyway,
No, actually,
so what about you, JF? You got a weird job or?
well, actually, speaking of bad paying jobs, my first job was okay. This is actually gonna be weird how it started, but I was probably like maybe 12, so I was underage, right? Last day of school, our bus driver turns around and he's like, "Who wants to make some money this summer?" to a bunch of kids, you know.
That's creepy.
Super creepy. You know, this is like 90 or late 90s, early 90s, I guess. So, you know, whatever. People didn't really care about that stuff, but we were like, yeah, sure. So our parents drop us off. He had a strawberry farm. So we were going to pick strawberries for him. So, our parents was like, okay, he's a trustworthy guy, you know, our bus driver. So we show up there, a bunch of kids, and he's paying us, it was $4 for like a big crate. So minimum wage back when I was that age was like less, it was like $4.25 maybe. And so we were getting paid less than $4 an hour because it would take like us like an hour and a half to fill all these things. But we were such shitty kids that some of the kids realized that they could put like hay and rocks at the bottom of the things and then put strawberries on top. So, you know, to quicken the process. I man, you guys are really productive. And I mean, in the end, it's like I'm trying to make a bit out of this, but because this guy, like, you don't feel bad for this guy because he's basically hiring like underage kids to do slave labor for him. You know, so we were just shitty kids.
Fuck this guy.
Yeah, fuck this guy. But I thought it was
Well, that's why all the Mexicans come up for the summers and do it now, is because I guess all the parents stop letting their kids do it. Because like literally, like they'll have these contracts. They'll bring tons of Mexicans up from Mexico from a period of, to come up and pick stuff, because people always complain about, oh, these immigrants are taking our jobs, yet nobody wants to do that shit. So they literally have to bring them up.
Yeah, we were literally taking people's jobs back then. I felt old.
Well, at least you didn't get murdered by the bus driver.
Was that?
At least you didn't get murdered by the bus driver. So
well, it's funny though. We talk about the bus driver's trustworthy. It's like, well, if you trust this person with a busload of kids to not kill them, I mean, why wouldn't?
It's true.
You
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, but it's true that the bus drivers in general get like. They shouldn't, because there's such a variety of people that do that job. But I find whenever there's one in like a movie or something, it's usually some like overweight, kind of gross dude for the most part.
Yeah.
The stereotypical bus driver. It's always
you can say Chris Farley. We get it.
Well, that's sort of who I was thinking at one point for sure. Yeah.
But yeah, like a bus driver turning around and asking kids like, hey, you want to make some money? Like in a big city, that wouldn't fly probably.
That's the sketchy part. Yeah. Him paying them. Yeah, man.
Not a very good pitch.
It's fun to think back on old jobs like that, though. The one job that I feel like should have sucked, but I liked a lot, was I worked at a place that was fast food, which, I mean, maybe some people enjoy that, but for the most part, I think it's pretty low on like the job ladder of things you want to do with your life, right? But I was working in the Saint Laurent food court at this really small place that wasn't part of any chain. It was just called Hot Dog. Like that was the name of the place, just Hot Dog. But it ended up being a sweet job because there was only ever a couple of people working there. And I was always paired with someone who turned out to be really cool. And at one point my buddy started working there. So we would just like put up the back in 5 minutes sign and go get high in the stairwell. And then we'd come back and make all this food for yourself, because we were allowed to make a reasonable amount of food, So that was one of those jobs that should have sucked, but I ended up really enjoying. I don't know where I was going with that particularly, but
how old were you? Because that sounds like the best job when you're like, 16.
I was 16. Yeah, it was like my first, not my first job, but my first job where I started clocking a lot of hours and like putting in a decent amount of time after school. I'd go and work until close or whatever.
Oh yeah, I mean, you're amongst your peers, right? Like you're amongst people that are cool. That you're like, yeah, this. Like my buddy worked at A&W, and people would always go and he would give us like free fries in the back. I
had a deal with the guy from Burger King. I used to work at Rogers Video when there was still video stores for a couple of years. And one way you could use sort of currency from there was people's late charges. So like if someone had like $50 of late charges, we as Rogers would usually say like, I'm sorry, but we can't let you rent anything until you like, make a dent in this and make some sort of payment to show that you're going to try to pay it off. But I didn't really care. I would just like erase people's late charges and be like, I'll get rid of that $50 late charge if you buy me like a pack of smokes for $12. And I'm talking to like strangers too, like complete strangers. And they would be happy because they'd be like, small price to pay rather.
Yeah.
But the Burger King guy, he would give me a chicken Caesar salad and I would give him a couple free rentals. And it was a pretty good job. I guess I abused all my jobs, but
I mean, who didn't at that age though?
Yeah.
I mean, like, why when you're 16, you don't give a shit or whatever. Like
Rogers, I was like, I think 18 to 20, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
Still pretty young and dumb.
Imagine paying off all your late fees at Blockbuster like the day before it shuts down. You're like,
I think people had wind that the closures were coming. So I don't know if that ever would have happened, but it would be funny if it actually did. I don't know. Maybe it did happen somewhere.
I bet there's still a whole generation now of kids that like are going to be baffled by the idea that Netflix used to be that you would get a disc sent in the mail to your house. And when you're done, you mailed it back. Like that was even like a thing, you know?
Yeah, I did that a few times. They had those kiosks, right? Where you would
a little red box or something. Yeah.
Or red box.
Well, no, I'm saying, but like that's Redbox. I'm talking about actual Netflix. Like Netflix used to just literally have it done through mail.
Oh, that's crazy.
I never did that.
I did do that once or twice. I remember closing the little envelope that was the size of the CD or whatever and putting it in. Yeah, man, that must have been like, I don't even know how long, 15 years ago or something. Well, I'm glad Netflix is what it is now because I can't even imagine doing that now. It seems like every year we become more and more spoiled with getting things immediately, which is probably not for the best, but.
Yeah. But it's also better for the environment if you think about it. Like if it's just zeros and ones on a wire instead of like having
just the digital transfer.
Same thing with like I love vinyl. And I think vinyl is like higher quality. But when I think about it, like streaming music is much better for the environment than buying all the CDs or vinyls and whatnot. So
there's a kid creeping behind you. That's adorable.
Although I realize that it may be bad news for us, JF, on March 5th, because apparently that's when Coming to America 2 comes out. So I'm not sure how many people are going to be wanting to watch that,
Yeah, but then they'll watch it the next day or the day after that. Like, yeah, I know a lot of people that are excited to see. But that's a good segue back into your film, actually, because I wanted to know partially how you guys met and decided to work on this together. That was one thing I was curious about.
Well, I was never really thought I'd be up for an orgy, but it was.
But JF just has those eyes.
Yeah, man, soft skin. Yeah. It was Andrew. I think it was because of the whole Andrew Wambolt's feature special. I think was really what kind of sparked it.
You guys just did a show together and kind of met that way.
No, so Andrew Wambolt was featuring at Yucks for his first feature at a New Talent Showcase, and we both showed up with like multiple cameras, and we actually recorded the audio from the board, and I tried to like direct it as an actual like small special.
Oh, nice.
And so that was our first time working together, and I think that's what I really want to do eventually with my sort of filmmaking careers. Like I want to start directing people's specials and things like that.
Wow, so so cool.
Yeah, I love that kind of stuff.
I'm no joke. I was just thinking about that the other day. I don't have any of the experience you guys do with film, but I was just thinking the other day how that's like one of those jobs I could see myself working towards in 5-10 years, or maybe, eventually, because that would be such a rad way of being involved in comedy. And this is for me again, but not having to do stand-up all the time, because I love comedy and I like doing stand-up sometimes, but I don't think I'm ever going to be the guy that wants to be full-time, really trying to grind like a lot of people I know who I have so much respect for. I agree. That would be a fucking badass thing to be making money doing, and just so many different comics you get to experience, launching people's careers, hopefully.
You'll have to go to another town though, because this is our town, kid.
Yeah, don't worry. I'm not picking up a camera anytime soon.
Well, it was actually kind of cool when we were talking with Jeremy Hotz about, he gave us a good insight to when he did like his own production at, was it Centerpoint, I think?
Yeah, Centerpoint Theater.
Yeah. And just talking about, and the cost of, and, really put into perspective at a certain level, how much it could actually, how much can go into it and how much you could charge too. And I think right now is, there's so much going on. Like Ottawa's got a fantastic comedy scene. And just even since kind of bringing this up, like a lot of comics have already kind of Sorry, can you guys hear me okay, by the way?
Yep.
Yeah. A lot of comics have actually already approached me, been like, yeah, it'd be so sweet, like if you guys could do that, just because, you know, they realize like they want to be able to expand their portfolio and they want to have like good stuff to send off to get bookings. So I think that it'll, now that things are reopening up, you know, this has definitely been kind of a good eye opener for the, not just the Ottawa community, but the kind of the surrounding areas too, as we've been, you know, the films kind of got that exposure. So it's definitely, it's a good time, because I think there's going to be a big boom in comedy. Like there's a lot of people obviously that want to do comedy, but I think a lot of people don't know, like they don't know how to do comedy. Like they know how to get on stage and do jokes, but like they don't know how to like market. They don't know how to make the world know about their presence as much. Yeah. So I think that's like a really important thing to do right now, is make sure that, you know, these people actually have the good exposure, you know, and have the ability to, you know, get a bigger audience and use social media and live streaming and stuff like that to, you know, to their advantage. So I think it's definitely an exciting time for what we're going to be seeing in Ottawa for the next few years.
Well, it'll be nice when you can record specials with full capacity rooms again too, just for the laughter effect. You know,
exactly.
It does make a big difference, I feel.
Yeah, for sure. You can't film a special with 25 people in the audience.
I mean, you could, and people would get that it's during the pandemic. It's not necessarily wrong. And if you're killing it, you might be still getting boisterous enough laughter from the people that are there that it would still sound awesome. I don't know. But a packed room always just sounds, it's a nice sound. I don't know.
Yeah, I know.
That audience of the liveliness of all these people connecting for this moment. You know?
I don't know if you guys ever seen Maria Bamford has a special on Netflix where she starts with one person, it's like her husband, and then she goes and she does stand up in front of like two people on a bench, and then it goes progressively bigger and bigger, and by the end she's like doing a theater show.
Yeah, I think I did see this.
Yeah, and then some, you know, at some point she's just like in a little coffee shop or a bookstore or something like that and she's filming her comedy special that way. I thought it was fucking brilliant.
Yeah, no, now that you're going through that, I totally remember watching that. That was pretty rad.
Yeah,
I think there's a lot of ways
to film too. Hard to plan it out.
Yeah,
I mean, you take a pavilion. I mean, there's quite a few even around Ottawa, but you take a good pavilion that's out at a park, you know, and you have it so it's promoted. People come out, so you're actually out there. You're doing it outside, so you can still have like some recorders set up in the crowd to record the audio, you know, and then have a switchboard and everything to record your set. So that way you can still get a bigger crowd, because, you know, let's say it's 50 people max indoors, but it's 200 outdoors. You can then, you know, actually get the 200 people to attend your show. So I think that you're probably going to have to start seeing a lot more outdoor comedy specials. And one of the guys that's in the documentary, Ben Bankus, like he really kind of set the tone for that. Like he had the first show in North America on, I think it was June 4th or June 5th in Toronto. And so from there, like tons of other outdoor shows kind of started to happen, and he was getting like 500 to 1,000 people at some times coming out to the park. And crazy. It was a big thing, but a lot of it was because of like protesting versus like comedy shows. So that was where, you know, there was a fine line between people being getting broken up by the police, because like there was cops there and tickets being given out and stuff. So it was a very interesting ordeal, but it really kind of helped to shine light on like how we can take comedy to a different level and find, again, lots of like alternative methods. And I think now that, I mean, we've obviously, I think, experienced ones that work and don't work, like drive-ins, you know, like people honk their horns as laughing, like, fuck that. Like, you know, but like, so everyone's just trying literally everything they can to make a comedy show work. Matt Santos did a great job doing some of those ones at some breweries, using like the part where the truck backs up to like the loading dock. So the loading dock doors open, people are there, that's the stage. And then the entire parking lot is filled with chairs, you know? So it's just a lot of good creativity, finding ways to make comedy happen, which is really inspiring when you think about it.
Yeah. It's nice that they're trying to find a way to still do it in all this craziness. You know, people might've just given up, but I don't really think stand-up people are that kind of people. I think they always are
really not
striving to find a way, you know?
No, and that's one of the other things about the documentary that we touched on is like a lot of people in the documentary, like Pierre Bro, for example, he's been around for like, you know, 30, 40 years, I think. So he's seen comedy go through different phases, and he's like, I'm not afraid of this, because, you know, this is just a phase, and we've always survived, you know, from the court jesters and the back in the day. And it's never going to go away, but it might change. And one of the things that I'm actually sort of excited about is the ability to stream live comedy to people that might not want to go to comedy clubs, you know?
Yeah.
So, I watched like Chris DiStefano, a New York comic, for example. Like I paid for his stream, and it was him in a theater. So there's still a live audience. You still hear the real laughter. It's not a Zoom show. It's not like a weird Zoom show where you a couple of people laughing.
It's like you're there virtually.
Yeah, it's like you're there. It's like you're watching a comedy special.
Yeah, that's cool.
Camera angles on that, and that's something that I think we could do at Yucks for people that might. Even during the pandemic, like people might not be comfortable going out to clubs yet, and at least
and then there's also no limit to capacity of like who can watch. Right? You could have like 1,000 people watching from their home. You can charge maybe not as much as you would for an in-person seat because that's a more visceral experience or whatever.
Bucks or $7 or something like that instead of 10. And people will watch.
The part that I'm really nervous about is the fact that comics are being paid less, so how does that affect the quality of comedy? Like you take somebody who's, supposed to be selling out 200 people, 500 people, 1,000 people, whatever the venue. Well, if you consider how ticket sales and all that dictate how much they get paid. So now you take all these comics getting paid less and there's less stage time. Yeah. So now people are not necessarily as willing to want to go out, but there's obviously a lot of people who've got disposable money. And really what we need to do is find this way to get the message that, and this is, I think, one of the worst things about what's happening now is like people are complaining like, oh, it costs this much money. Like, why does it cost this much? But then these burger joints like keep popping up and like Firehouse Subs, or now people are paying $20 to go get a meal. Like it's just ridiculous, but like it's weird. People are very selective. Like they'll complain about spending a couple more dollars on something because of inflation, but then they'll go out and they'll spend, their $9 at Starbucks every day or whatever. So comedy though, so people now, because of streaming and the accessibility of stuff, people don't want to pay for it, which really sucks. But you have to realize like, if you don't, what happens if it goes away? So it's like, we need to help them realize like, you're just doing it to make sure that this thing that obviously everybody loves, like, if somebody doesn't like comedy, get fucked. You might like Brian Regan because he's clean versus, Anthony Jeselnik, but to not like any comedy makes no sense to me. But if that goes away, it's a huge part of our culture that is, as far as I'm concerned, a necessity. And we got to help make sure people realize like, hey, $5 from 100 people can go a long way when it comes to, making sure that this individual comic is making a living. Because if they can't make a living, then A, they have to quit, or they might have other mental health issues or, substance abuse or whatever, which is really what we're seeing right now. You take people in Toronto, have been almost 4 months now without comedy, 4 months with no income, no comedy. Yeah, that's brutal. And you take that kind of artistic person cooped up in an apartment in Toronto with nothing to do. You can't do the thing that's the most important thing to you, and I don't think people realize like that's what's going on. But Metallica can get on there and put a fucking stage together and do a show, and people will still pay because it's Metallica, and it's a weird double standard,
Yeah, definitely. And no, man, it's brutal. And especially in a city like Toronto where there's that many more comics that all would have been competing for stage time, and now they're all just what we do. And they're in the hardest lockdowns there for most of the time too, compared to some of like our city, like Ottawa, we got more breaks where they would lift the lockdown, but you always hear Peel, York, and Toronto always like just, getting the worst of it.
Yeah. And if you consider too, like just even internationally, I mean, the comedy festivals, that go on Just for Laughs, Winnipeg, Canada is really a hot spot. I mean, like we're well known for our comedy, and it's something that, these festivals and how it brings, the amateurs to a better starlight, that's all now going backwards a lot. So like, how long is it going to take for this new wave of comics to get their 15 minutes of fame again? Yeah. Right.
And when you were saying, if you don't like comedy, get fucked, I feel like very similar about people who say, I don't really like music, or, I don't really like animals. Those two get me and stop me dead in my tracks every time. Like, what? Like, yeah, you don't have to you can be a dog person, a cat person, you can like lizards or something, but to just be like, I don't like animals, I find that very weird. And music as well. Like there's so many different kinds. It just seems some sort of inhuman thing to just say like, I don't know, maybe that's just me, but
what you're describing is a sociopath.
Well, yeah, that's what I was going to say. It sounds like serial killer material.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Well, back to the film. I wanted to ask you, you guys are doing like a fundraiser thing, right? That ties into everything we were just talking about people that are struggling. So what's the plan there exactly to try to raise funds for comics?
So back when the pandemic first hit, there was, well, as you recalled in the film, Derek Forgy. So he has his 10-minute talk show, and he was doing this thing on his birthday, kind of like a 24-hour telethon type thing. And, he was trying to raise $1,000, and he's really central in the comedy community as well. And he just kind of got involved from kind of reaching out to the Canadian Association of Stand-Up Comics, and then Just for Laughs and SiriusXM, and these people kind of caught wind, and it turned into a pretty big fundraiser, and they raised about $33,000. And they then had comedians who were qualified. So, like, for example, somebody who's like, that's their income, like they're considered a professional comedian. They don't have like a day job like we do, right? So if they had no income and they were just getting just EI or whatever, then they can send in an application. And then they were doing like a lottery style $500 grants that were giving out to comedians that applied. I think luckily everybody was able to at least get one. So now that we fast forward literally a year later, with more of this bullshit been going on, obviously comedians need help again, right? So we're trying to put together basically a second wave, if you will. So we're not reinventing the wheel. We're kind of doing the same thing. So Mark Breslin really liked the film when I sent it to him, and he was really stoked and loved the idea of the fundraiser. So Yuck Yucks has decided to get on board and really help as a sponsor. And so what we're doing is on Monday and Tuesday here in Ottawa on March 1st and 2nd, we're doing a film release at Yuck Yucks. All the ticket sales are going to actually be going to the fundraiser. And we're going to be doing some raffles and door prizes as well to raise some extra money and kind of kickstart on March 1st. And then on the 5th, when the movie comes out, we're really hoping that if we can get a lot of people viewing the movie, it'll really help to kind of capture the story of what's going on, and people will be more apt to want to donate money. And our goal is to reach about $50,000. So
right on. And so can people, if we want to watch it on March 5th, that's going to be like you pay to download and it goes towards the fundraiser?
No, we had thought about that. And we thought it would be better to just let people watch the movie and then donate, kind of have a passive kind of ask at the end,
That's cool.
We contemplated that, but I just think that I don't know. I think we're just going to let it just be kind of like a live release and then kind of leave it up to the viewers to decide what they want to do.
So free on YouTube then.
Yeah. So it'll be on the website is www.comedy19movie.com. So you can get information on the movie there, trailers there.
Comedy 19, not COVID-19.
Yes. Comedy 19.
I erroneously stated at the beginning of this thing.
But yeah, so you got a link to the GoFundMe page. The GoFundMe page is up, but it will be activated on March 1st to start receiving donations. So
nice. Well, and I should say that when you're speaking about all this, people watching this episode, if they're watching it on the first day it came out, it will be March 1st. So
right.
So if you're watching this episode right now and this episode just came out today, then come to the fundraiser. And we're performing there now. Is that confirmed yet?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah,
so
you'll be on March 1st.
Some comedy for the first time since September. So we'll see how that goes. And I'm looking forward to it, man. I think it's going to be a really, really good time. Yeah. I'm happy to see the final cut of the film too.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited as well too, because Glenn Foster, who was also one of those kind of Canadian comedians that when I was really young, I was watching on TV all the time, back with Norm Macdonald and Mike McDonald and Jeremy Hotz. And I didn't really think of it. He wasn't really on my radar when we were kind of thinking of people to be in the film. And it wasn't just until a couple of weeks ago, I was doing a Zoom show and he was on it. I'm like, hey, it's that guy. It's the Canadian guy, So we became Facebook friends and chatted a little bit because he shared the trailer. And then I kind of asked him, I was like, hey, do you want to come to the movie? It'd be cool to meet you and just be an honor to have you there. And then, decided to have him as kind of a special guest to come on and do a bit of stand up as well too. Cause who knows when the last time was that he was doing comedy at Yuck Yuck. So I think that'll be kind of a nice treat as a bit of a tribute to, the Canadian comedy industry.
Is he going to be Monday, Tuesday or both or?
He'll be on both nights.
Oh, nice. All right, cool. I wanted to ask you, as far as, well, both of you guys really making this film, what were your biggest takeaways and things that you learned, both about filmmaking and just about comedy in general, and the subject matter that you were approaching?
I mean, just from a filmmaking perspective, I think Scott and I bought a camera because of this. We just went and pooled all our resources together and tried to make something, but then we realized, okay, we need this audio equipment. We were going to need these cameras. We're going to need tripods. We're going to need all this stuff to make a film. But now we have the equipment to actually make a documentary. And that was pretty amazing, just that we were able to do it. We didn't get any funding. We were just self-funded this whole documentary ourselves, and just the time that the comics were giving us. But also from a comedy perspective, it was really cool to see just how much comedy meant to people, I think.
Oh, nice.
And everybody had their own story, their own perspective on it, but comedy touched everybody's lives in certain ways, and it was really cool to see how much it just meant to everybody, I think.
That's a great answer.
How much they miss it.
Well, and it's kind of literally, if I were to say the amount of money that it cost us to make this documentary would be whatever it cost us and basically gas to drive to and from, but which really, because a lot of it we didn't have to drive far because it's around Ottawa. So I had a camera that is not a great camera, but it worked, and we were filming stuff down in Yuck Yucks, realizing these cameras just don't hold up, because it's Howard's interview was so good, but our cameras really weren't that accustomed for the low light, So I went out and invested in a really good expensive camera and lenses specifically, so that way, we can film in Yuck Yucks again. If you look at footage that just would have been released, for example, I just posted a new video on my YouTube of my set from the weekend, and it's just night and day difference in quality because, of the camera. So it just kind of really helped to really ignite that passion. And kind of for me, I actually decided to start my company. When I was doing this, I was just kind of on the edge about doing sales still, because I've been doing sales for a long time. I went to school for TV broadcasting. I was doing camera work for a while. And then after I got into sales for almost a decade and just completely left the industry, and this whole, dream of going to Vancouver and getting into TV and film, I just slowly fizzled and, got into a serious relationship. So when all that kind of came to an end, I was like, what am I going to do next? And so during the pandemic, I moved back to Ottawa, just felt like I needed a change. And it just everything has just been just beautifully, almost serendipitously in a sense, lining up. And I've been searching for what I would say my people or my tribe. And I feel like I found it through this, and it's been very humbling. The people that I've met through this, it's amazing how it was easy to approach everybody. You send an email, hey, are you interested? Or, I go up to Kyle Brownberg after seeing the show, and he'd just be like, yeah, this would be great. And it's just nice that all these people that are, not just comedians, but, friends now, people that I never really would have thought I would have had this kind of network at my disposal. And it's just been great to finally really go almost all in. I opened up a company. I'm really taking my comedy, my music to a point now where I was kind of afraid to do it before. And my happiness has just gone up 1,000%, and everybody I've met in Ottawa has just been phenomenal, and I feel really at home because of this. And I'm really excited to share it with everyone.
That's awesome. Kyle is a really nice dude too, I should say, after you mentioned him, because he's one of the nicest people I've met doing this show. And he's great. Yeah. I wanted to just plug, because in a couple of weeks, this is March 1st, this one will be coming out. So on the 16th, I think we're recording for his podcast. So if anyone wants to check that out, I think it's going up on the 18th. He does a podcast called Best Actress, where they review the Best Actress winners from different years at the Oscars, and then they discuss who they think should have won. So I've been watching these 5 different movies and writing notes, and I'm super excited. So I just wanted to mention that and give Kyle a shout out.
Which movies?
The year we did 86. So it has aliens, which is awesome, because I didn't even know Sigourney Weaver had been nominated.
Yo, she's the shit in that movie.
That's such a good flick. I can't wait to watch that. The rest of them I had never heard of. One of them's called The Morning After, which is Jane Fonda and young Jeff Bridges. which I watched that one. I'm not going to go into it because I don't want to spoil all my critiques about or my thoughts about it. But there's a few other ones, but I hadn't really heard of many of them. So it's been a really cool experience. Just, you know, when you kind of force yourself to watch a movie that you otherwise might not have ever given the time of day because it's not your general interest category or whatever, you know. So yeah, you know, I'm really looking forward to the experience.
That kind of reminds me of like my parents split up and I live with my dad, and he wasn't really you know, we had our hardships at this age, partly because, you know, he's like ex-military and like very like ironclad kind of businessman. And at that time I had black hair and I was in a punk band, and, you know, I was still kind of being a little bit of a shithead because of the divorce. So we wanted to do like some father son stuff and went to see a movie. And I mean, at this point, I don't even remember what the last time it was that we had done something like that. So it was just kind of like hey, let's go see a movie, you know, and it was kind of like got there and looked through like what are we going to pick? Wasn't many options. And so we went to see The Incredibles, but I picked it, and like my dad didn't realize it was an animated movie. And like my dad just like never swears, right? Like he was just, again, he's a very clean cut kind of guy, and his demeanor in a sense is always very professional. And I just remember this, like we're sitting in the theater and all the previews are animated Pixar movies. So my dad eventually, he's like, "Is this an animated movie?" And I go, "Yeah." Fuck. And I was just like, I haven't heard him say fucking forever, you know? And I just thought, and then he ended up loving the movie. And he was like, wow, what a great movie, you know?
Well, I was going to say, yeah, why was he against animated? Just because it was like childish or something?
I don't know. I guess like that's not his cup of tea. So the idea that he was now like, you know, randomly going out with his son for the first time, seeing an animated movie, it was just, anyway, I just remember that. But then he ended up loving the movie because it's so sweet.
That's awesome. Oh, man. Yeah, Pixar, they do good stuff. Good family.
Soul. You got to watch Soul. So good.
I have not seen that one yet. I know what it is. The jazz
singer. The new one with Jamie Foxx. It's very good.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because they did the other one that was about emotions, Inside Out, or is that what it's called? No, I think I'm screwing up the title, but it's like a girl and it's all her emotions inside her brain. That's like the characters. Like one of them is jealousy. One of them is, I'm not even going to try because I'm going to butcher this, but I thought it was called Inside Out.
I think you're right. Yeah.
Yeah, it was supposed to be like amazing. Everyone I've talked to is like, "Oh, you're gonna cry at the end. It's brutal." So I just haven't gotten around to watching that one.
I've seen that one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
was it rough?
Yeah, it was good. I mean, when you have kids, I think, I don't know about you, but I'm much more emotional when I watch things that have like children involved. Like I watched this movie, Lion. I don't know if I talked about it on my podcast before, but have you ever seen this movie? It's about this kid in India that gets lost on a train, ends up getting adopted and raised in Tasmania. It has like Nicole Kidman.
Oh no, never even heard of that.
Slumdog Millionaire, but it's based on a true story. And then the climax is like, you know, he's trying to find his mother back and all that. And I cried like a baby at the end of this movie. I cried so much, and I actually had to go and like, I didn't wake up my son, but I had to go like sneak into his room and like give him a hug. I was like crying so much. But since I've been a father,
that's awesome though.
Yeah. I wish I could cry more often almost, but
it does feel like this valve that gets turned on kind of like, and you're like, oh, I didn't know I needed to do that. But
yeah, it felt so good. It's so cathartic. Like I'll watch sometimes like these veterans coming home videos and like, you know, surprising their kids and like just bawling and crying. Yeah.
Oh man.
I used to be kind of like Chandler, if you guys recall that episode of Friends where he's like, you know, oh yes, it was very sad when the artist stopped drawing the deer, you know. But I seem to have like awoken something. Like I went from this like really big shift of like hating who I was because I became this like ruthless, borderline narcissistic businessman, and I just felt like I just took the person that I was inside and like just murdered him. So I had to like rediscover who I was and everything. But then like I realized like after I've like reformed myself, and now I feel like so much more empathetic, which is awesome. But to a point, I was watching Breaking Bad the other day, and like I haven't finished the series for some reason. Don't criticize me. So I was like rewatching it because I was like, I knew I watched the first 3 seasons, but I hadn't finished season 3. Watched some of season 4. So I'm like, fuck it, I'm out of TV show. Started binging it. Hank just got shot. He's in the hospital, and his wife, like, you know, this is how you know a show deserves Emmys. The wife's in there. She's like bitching at the DEA, like his boss is coming in because he didn't have his gun. I'm fucking crying all of a sudden. I'm like, why am I so emotional right now? You know. But I'm like, damn, like this is a good show. Like, no wonder everyone loves it. Like, the acting is impeccable. And I think that's also how you know, like, when you take, like, what I forget the name of the actress in The Shining, but it's like she's so bad at acting. It's not believable. When you got a person who's like really good, that's what you want to do, is you want to feel everything they're feeling. And so, but now I kind of feel like nervous because I'm like, shit, if I'm crying at a show about a teacher making meth, like.
Yeah, but that's the thing. You got to just not care about crying or look at it as a bad thing and look at it as just like a natural part of life that everybody, it's a healthy thing to do, realistically. Not all the time, mind you. If you're crying like nonstop from when you wake up, that's a different story. But I think part of it
was so delicious.
Part of it for me, like I find I've always been a sensitive person, but as I get older, it intensifies because change is hard, and because it's a reminder of your own mortality. The older you get, it's a lot easier to think about like, oh, okay. Like in 20, I was just thinking about that. I'm 35, and I think it's a weird age to be at, because if you go back 15 years, you're 20 years old. And if you go forward 15 years rather, you're 50. And those are such massively different sort of parts of the age spectrum and what kind of a life and where you're going to be at physically. And I don't know. It's just weird. It's a weird conjuncture to be at. Is that a word, conjuncture? Yeah, I don't know. Anyways, that's where I'm at. I'm thinking that time when I get older, that adds to my emotional state for sure, just because it seems like, I don't know, mortality is just one of those things for me that like you think about your parents, or, oh, they're getting kind of old, or just, or your kids are growing up too fast. That's another thing too. For me, at least, my kids are getting old and I'm like, oh.
How old are your kids now?
My oldest is 12 and I have a 10-year-old too. So
that's crazy.
Yeah. Well, and my youngest is 3.5, almost 4, I should say. And having him around kind of reminds me of when they were that age. And then I'm like, oh my God, you're so big now. You're almost teenagers. But yeah, I've just gotten more sensitive the older I get, I think, because I don't know. It's just life is beautiful, and you want to respect and recognize that more, I think.
Yeah. And I hope there's a shift with, like, I'm sure like our parents or grandparents era, like men didn't cry, it was like, kind of like, you had to be tough and stoic all the time. But I think now, men are more in touch with their emotions, or at least it seems like societally is more acceptable to be more in touch with your emotions and cry and then talk about it. And like, I think it's great if we can actually shift towards that, or if I'm hoping this is where society is going. I don't know if it's just because I'm getting older and I can just like whatever, I don't care.
Well, that's what I think it is. It's partially society, definitely. Like if we go back to like the 50s or something, everybody would they treated crying like masturbation. Like you don't do it in front of other people. Yeah. It's kind of a shameful thing you keep to yourself.
Wait, what? No. Oh, I've been doing it wrong the whole time.
Oh, that's hilarious.
But yeah, I guess this is like Bill Burr's stand up, but like, men would just like bottle up their emotions and then they just die of a heart attack at 50, all because they didn't want to admit they wanted to pet a puppy or something. It's like.
But I think it comes down to the individual level of just like not giving a fuck as much as you did when you were younger, and you cared. People saw you crying. Like that stuff doesn't bother me anymore. And it sounds like sort of the same for you, where you're just owning that part of your emotional, soul, or whatever you want to call it. Like I'm more proud of that than ashamed. Whereas when you're a teenager, you're embarrassed if you're weak or vulnerable. It's a lot easier to feel like you're nobody now, or you suck or something. But when you get older, at least I find with some maturity, you just start to respect it all as being part of the process, and being more in touch with your true thoughts and feelings, which isn't a bad thing.
Yeah. Like we're kind of lucky in a sense that, if I were to use like my grandpa, for example, his mom died of Spanish flu. And then, he had to take over and do a lot of those manly things on the farm and help with, a lot of family duties. And, he was in the Air Force, and then, the World War II happened. And, so how does that shit just last with you? And then you raise the next generation. But then what happens is that somebody that would have been like our grandparents' generation, and then the kids after that, then you take like our generation, and then the shift happens. So now there's like this huge divide in society between the last remnants of the generation who had like old school mentality versus now these new kids that are like, oh, you shouldn't use this word, or you shouldn't, like that safe space mentality. And it's not necessarily bad or good. It's just like these two last like remaining relics, if you will,
polar opposites
of the old school are like, and once they die, it's like that'll all kind of go away, and then but who knows what the next kind of shift would be. So there's still all these people out there that are still going to be like, oh, you're queer for crying, or they're going to diminish you in some way for that, or they're going to look down negatively. It's like, hey man, just because you guys went to war, it's like, yeah, we get that, but it doesn't mean that people now are soft because they have emotional intelligence, and they respect people.
Yeah. There is going to always be some people that are really, simple-minded about that kind of stuff and always trying to be tough all the time. And I don't think that's going to go away completely, but same with racism and all that. All these things are still going to exist in some form, but it at least hopefully is going in the right direction where it's slowly getting diluted generation after generation. There's less people passing that shit on down to their kids and trying to keep that mentality going, because enough people are waking up along the way and saying, no, fuck this. We've been doing it wrong. And I'm okay with adjusting to this newer, better reality, But that's all we can hope for. I don't know. Because it's true with the polar opposites and the way people are on the right and the left extremes right now. It's bananas. I wish people could be a little bit more in the middle, trying to recognize that most things in life are somewhere in the middle. It's, things aren't cut and dry most of the time.
Yeah. Well, that's why comedy is so important too, because it brings this stuff together. I mean, some people do it better than others, but you can take certain people. I mean, like Bill Burr is a good example. He's a little bit more ranty on it as well too, where, obviously some people like Anthony Jeselnik's more, he will just make a dead baby 9/11 joke, but people just need to still kind of have the balls to speak their mind and just kind of realize I think comedians, a lot of times we are in the middle and we're able to hopefully bring the two sides together because, obviously some comedians are going to be really left, or are going to be really right too, but that's still fewer and far between. And that's one of the things I really think is kind of beautiful is it's almost like nothing is out of the realm to be able to make fun of. Right. And again, because every comic that I personally know so far seems to have a lot of their drive or their influence and any reason for doing comedy come from some bad happening, some type of trauma, whether it being somebody died, or they had an abusive relationship, or they had a very fucked up upbringing, and so they realize how fucked up the world is, and they find this way of an outlet, and then they can make other people laugh. Really, what better way to make a flower out of fucking dirt? You know what I mean? And people don't see it that way sometimes. It's dumb. It's like if everybody could see it from the perspective of a comedian, I think the world would be a much happier place,
Yeah, there's some comedians' perspectives that I probably wouldn't want to get in their mind for too long, but it depends on the comic. I wanted to ask you guys about the documentary, or I guess maybe this is more for Scott, but did making that documentary lead you to a point where you think that you would want to make another documentary in the future? And also, if you do want to make another documentary in the future, what would you love to be the focal point and the topic that you would want to explore?
Well, the answer is yes. I've always kind of liked and been intrigued by documentary filmmaking as it is. I never really would have seen myself doing documentaries, but in a certain way, it's definitely kind of opened up that door for me. And I've been kind of thinking about that. I'm not really too sure as of yet, just because there's still so much going on with this one. But I had a guy that used to work with me when I was in London, and he just kind of approached me he just knew that I was doing stuff. We weren't even super close when we worked together. We didn't really talk very often, but he was just like, hey man, I've got this idea for a documentary I want to do, which was just about I think an unsolved murder from London or something like that. So I just kind of thought it was weird. Hey, now apparently people are kind of reaching out to me about that as well. But I personally just want to travel the world. And I actually have an idea of going to maybe more of an episode documentary series versus a movie, going to the happiest countries in the world and finding out why they're so happy. Going to obviously, I think a lot of people hear about Denmark, for example, but go there and strategically interview people to figure out what is it about that culture that makes their society so happy. And Canada is ranked up there in some ways too. So we'd have to
Yeah, I was going to say, which countries are like the top 10? I'm wondering.
A lot of like
Denmark,
Switzerland,
like
Denmark, a lot of those areas in Europe, and I think Australia too. So I really want to be able to travel the world personally, and I think that would be something that I could really speak to because of just my how much importance I put on positivity and the way that I want to, like, I want to be able to influence people and help make people happier. Like I used to be like a sales coach and a life coach, and a lot of that went into like power of thought and how to like just be in a better mindset. And so I think people don't like, I joke with my friends all the time. We'll just be like hashtag first world problems. Like, oh yeah, my fucking phone I cracked the screen on my phone, or, again, I got into a car accident. My Acura's in the garage for a few days. I'm like, okay, well, there's guys out there right now that are like trying to find out if they're going to be able to feed their family today, or like they're in a war zone, or they've got like way bigger problems than we take for granted. And so we're over here being miserable and just being pissed off at the world when we have fucking life handed to us on a silver platter most of the time. Right. So I think that our Western civilization has become so fucking spoiled.
Yeah.
That we don't
There's not enough gratitude.
Yeah. But also it's like people don't realize like how different it's done in some other countries, and the mentality of the people and the philosophy behind it, which, Western civilization really falls behind on. And obviously like impoverished countries struggle because of poverty, but I don't know. To me, I just think it would be a really fun and exciting experience. But whether
that series you described, that sounds like a really cool. I would watch that, finding out why the happiest places are so happy. It seems like a really cool question to ask. And then JF, I'll be looking forward to the comedy specials that you'll be putting out. So,
well, I've actually also started working on a documentary that I'm not sure if I'm going to finish, because I don't know if you're familiar with the Flapjack 10 story in Ottawa.
Oh yeah, vaguely. The Waffle House where people were performing or something.
Yeah, and then basically and I don't want to go too much into it right now, but one of the club owners didn't like it, so basically
because it was across the street or something, right?
Yeah, it was like on the same side of the street on Preston, and so basically they weren't allowed to perform, but because they weren't allowed to perform, they were banned for a year because they had performed this one open mic. Because of that, all those Flapjack 10 that I'm calling them, they opened up a bunch of different open mics around town, and I think that's the triggering moment that sort of gave Ottawa its open mic comedy life. Like Swizzles and Wellington Eatery was basically all those people that didn't have any stage time, so they just created their own stage. And when I heard this story, I was like, man, would be such a fascinating documentary. And I've been tracking down like all the people, and I interviewed like a few of them wouldn't want to be in the documentary because they still want to get stage time in this club, and I want to get the original club owner in the documentary as well to show like it's all water in the bridge now. It's kind of funny,
yeah,
but there was like, for real, there was some animosity for like at least a year or two because of that. So I just think it'd be such a cool kind of story of like, it's almost like an origin story, but like the Ottawa comedy community, you know what I mean?
And it's got a good name too. I feel like it would catch people's ear. What, Flapjack 10?
Yeah, the Flapjack 10 is like the Hateful Eight.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, yeah. I didn't mean to exclude you from that question, actually, just because you had talked about doing the comedy specials. But
yeah,
I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Well, I wanted to say, I guess we've gone over most of the stuff that I wanted to talk about. I was going to bring up that you guys had done Sober October when you filmed me for the documentary. I remember you guys saying that you had done Sober October, and I kind of wanted to know, how did that go for you guys? Just because it's something I've debated doing, but I always kind of don't at the last minute. I kind of find some excuse, and it's a lot to commit to, really, to being completely stone cold sober for a month.
Well, it's funny because I did Sober October, and then in November we met up for beers for my podcast, and we were like, I was off.
And November was bad. It was like you just made up for it.
Oh, you just doubled down.
Yes, they call it Sober October and Bender November. So,
yeah.
See, that's almost why I've been afraid to approach it.
Yeah,
I definitely did a lot of the good work I did in October. But one thing I learned was how much my sleep was, because I was still recovering from insomnia, and I stopped drinking, and I realized like how much of a difference. Like I got sleeping pills, which was huge.
Nice.
So that was a big positive for me. Yeah. Like
Yeah,
now I
they say
realize
you
like,
don't get a good sleep when you pass out, they say.
No, you don't. Like for me now, like if I drink a fair amount, like I'll go to bed, I'll pass out, I'll wake up at like 4 or 5 in the morning. And then after that, I'm pretty much not getting back to sleep. And I've kind of accepted that. But if I decide to have like some days where I just decide not to drink or have like a couple beers spaced out, I can usually sleep fine. But it's definitely was really nice to kind of like really feel like I was like resolved of my insomnia during that month. So that was huge.
That's awesome. Yeah. To know that you can do that. If you're ever really struggling, you can just cut out the booze for a couple weeks and get back on that path.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah,
I was thinking about doing like a dry July as opposed to a sober October because it's weed that's generally been harder for me to cut out. I have been cutting down and experimenting with doing it less in the last couple months, and it's been okay. But yeah, I don't know if I could do a month of no weed. I mean, I probably could, but I haven't tried yet. But dry July, it sounds easier for me to just say, okay, no drinking for the month, but I can still blaze, you know?
Yeah, because drinking July is like a big part of.
Yeah, well, that's what I thought about doing it a couple of times, and then it was always like, oh, but we're going to that barbecue on Saturday, or like, there's always reasons to drink in the summertime. People just want to drink more when it's nice out.
Yeah, no. I just did dry January, and for me, dry January is pretty easy because it's just like
it's a depressing month, anyways.
Depressing month, and actually you feel better, and you've been drinking over the holidays, you've been eating too much, and it's like, okay, you know, it's a new year, resolutions are fresh. So I did it. It's almost like a cleanse. I'll do it once. I'm gonna try to probably do like 3 months of a year, intermittently going sober or something like that, because I don't think I want to be ever completely sober. I do know I could have a real drinking problem if I don't watch myself. I have an addictive personality, and I have like substance, I know it's a slippery slope, so I have to be very careful with that.
Yeah, I can relate to that completely. Like, I think that for the most part, weed, I have a medical, I can get mine medical. Like, I have all the cards for that to, so it kind of puts you in a different category, I suppose, because I'm taking my medication, But with drinking, I find the same thing. It's a slippery slope. I think I manage it. I'm responsible when I drink, at least. But the older that I get, I find there's a lot of nights where you feel kind of brain dead after having maybe one too many, and you're just kind of like, what am I doing? This is not where I want to be, And it hits you harder. The hangovers get worse the older I get, I find too. So it has less and less appeal to me. But I also find, like you said, the idea of being in a program or something, and that's a huge commitment to be like, yeah, I'm going to say I have it so bad that I need to go to AA. Like, I don't think I'm that kind of person. I good for those people who need that, of course. But I just feel like, I don't want to be to the point where I have to say, I can't touch this for the rest of my life because it has so much control over me. I want to be the one in the end who's like, no, I'm going to do a sober October or whatever, because this is a decision I get to make, but I don't want to cancel it and cut it out of my life completely and not have that option there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, it's such a huge part of our culture and has been basically like as long as man has been around. And you think about it. So it's like, obviously it's so integrated into our culture that the idea of it going away, it's almost like, if you're one, like I have a buddy who doesn't drink, and sometimes it's hard because there'll be a social event that's it's like sometimes it revolves around drinking in a sense, like a barbecue could, where it really limits, because you're just like this odd person out, so it's like, but he's never had drinking problems as much. It's just more of he just doesn't want to drink. He doesn't see the value in it. To him, it was just a lifestyle decision. But then I have another friend who, he would sneak in the bathroom and chug a Mickey of vodka, and then it's 7:30 at night, and we're all like, what the fuck's wrong? And he's like, just shit-faced already, and he was his was like, if you don't quit drinking, you might die, right? So it was complete polar opposites, but I think if you can find the fine line to realize if I'm going to go to a specific event and I'm with people that don't drink, I cannot drink. And if I go to another one where we're going to do a kegger, I'm going to do a keg stand, fuck it. That's where I like to be.
Yeah. Well, making it count, I find, is a nice way of just if you, let's say you're like, I'm not going to drink until Friday, and then we'll watch a movie and make a night of it or whatever. Then when that time actually comes, you appreciate it so much more. And there's not as much guilt of oh yeah, but I drank yesterday though, or whatever. And then you start to feel like, you're not taking care of yourself, which you aren't really. So I don't know. I do like the ability to drink, but I think it's like you said, a slippery slope. And I think that it's certainly unhealthy. Even if you're not someone I'm not worried that I'm someone who's going to need to go into AA or die in a drunk driving accident because I don't fuck with that shit. But I do think that I'm someone that would start eating a lot less healthy, being lazy the next day and not working out and shit like that. That's the reason that I want to keep tabs on my drinking, just because I find it's a slippery slope to like not being the best version of yourself. And you also see a lot of people who are in AA, like celebrities or whatever, that cutting everything out was such a transformative thing for them. And they seem like they have their shit together so much. Like someone like Russell Brand, he's like Mr. Meditation guru now, you know? So I have respect for
Robert
that
Downey
path.
Jr.
Robert Downey Jr. Yeah.
Yeah, I have so much respect for that path when it's right for someone, but it's definitely, you know.
Well, I read Russell Brand's book Recovery, and it's about the 12 step, but it's like his own kind of take and everything. And I mean, he was a heroin user, so it's much different.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, he's like completely changed his life around. And now he's like just so full of wisdom, so brilliant. It would have been a shame had he not, you know, gone off and like completely ruined his life. So.
Well, heroin, especially, a lot of people, amazing people, have died from that shit way too young. So
yeah.
It's
one thing I will say that's been helping is this, you know, it comes in a wide variety of assorted flavors, you know. The new peach is tip top.
Oh yeah, I just saw that. Yeah, I don't.
Well, I don't drink pop. Like I eat very healthy, and I'm pretty strict with that too. And to me, it's like if I have 2 beers or 3 beers, that's a hell of a lot healthier than drinking like Pepsi or Coke or Mountain Dew or shit like that. You know, like so like to me, like I have that, water, and like coffee, and then like the occasional time whatever, like there's other things, you know, or wine, but like typically to me, like I keep like black coffee, you know, and no refined sugar, so that way I'm like whatever, like I'm having a couple of beers, like you know, it's wheat and water, like
yeah, I mean it can catch up to you, but it's usually the bad food decisions you're making when you're drunk that are really like putting on the belt loops, you know.
Last night I had a cold one with my just chicken breast with hot sauce and balsamic vinegar, 0 calories, with just frozen vegetables put in a saucepan with some Montreal steak spice. Just nice, clean, healthy meal, you know?
Yeah. Oh, dude, my downfall is pizza, though. Like, I fucking love pizza so much. I sometimes eat it a few times a week. I'm not even lying. But I then do like fasts when I can, and I try to make sure I eat my vegetables, and I exercise every day. So, or mainly, I might take a day off once in a while, but I try to do some shit every day.
But you got kids, right? So, I mean, you order pizza, your family's eating it, right? To me, if I order pizza, I'm either gonna eat a large pizza by myself, which is not good, or I'm gonna have pizza for 3 days, you know? So like, I really only reserve it for when I have, like, if I'm with people, you know?
That is a good tip that I've learned, is ordering less than you think you want, because I guarantee you the amount you think you want is the amount that's going to give you leftovers for tomorrow, which is not what you need. You know, if you don't want to feel guilty, I'm going to have pizza tonight. I'll eat the amount I need, and then there's nothing left to tempt me tomorrow, you know, for breakfast or whatever.
That is smart. And also when you're talking about like exercising and everything, I feel like this pandemic has really, for me, it's solidified like a ritual of things that I need to do to feel good. You know, like every morning I meditate for 20 minutes, first thing in the morning. I do either yoga, or I found this, like, it's kind of like a break fit, it's called, like sort of light, sort of flexibility movement in the morning. And then I take a hot, cold shower. And so like, I'm like super regimented in a way that I was never before.
Well, it's survival tactics, really, though, right? Your brain kicked into some sort of gear of like, okay, like these are weird days and it's starting to affect me, and I need like a system here that's going to keep my sanity and hopefully keep me healthy. So,
yeah, exactly. And I kind of wish I would have found this out before, but you know.
I felt the same way. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a silver lining, you know, of you know, a lot of positive things that can come from this. I mean, obviously some people just been just so screwed over and lost everything, businesses, you know, marriages, whatever. But, you know, I think it did force people to realize like that, you know, life is fragile, things can happen that you would never predict. And then, you know, put yourself in a position where you have to, you know, find ways to solve these problems. I mean, people naturally, we solve problems. It's what we've done ever since, you know, the dawn of time. You know, okay, we have to build you know, find foods, we build better, you know, hunting weapons and stuff. So here we are, people are facing mental health issues or boredom or whatever, you know, and, you know, we're seeing all kinds of surges and a variety of things because of it. So, in a way, it's like we can be like, yeah, the pandemic really sucked, and it did, because I mean, people died and it ruined a lot of things, but we shouldn't just focus on that, because a lot of very positive things have come from it. And I think it's given people like a lot of that like necessary downtime to really like step back and like think about things and like prioritize things and realize like what's important, and I mean, whether being like myself deciding to, career change and open my own business, or, deciding to have better lifestyle choices. So I feel it's like, either some people just let the demons take over and they drink too much, or they gained weight and they just decided to not, jump on that, they're on the dock instead of on the boat. But I think that the people that are on the boat are going to be so much better off now. And we're going to have like a lot higher caliber people in all industries going forward,
It's weird though, because I feel like I've been kind of riding a wave that's been up and down throughout the pandemic, where I have like weeks or months where I feel like, oh yeah, like I'm totally on the ball and I'm feeling really fit and healthy mentally and whatever. And then other months where I'm like struggling. I'm like, oh man, like when the winter started for me was when, almost like right after we did me and JF on the patio for that podcast of yours,
which was
happy hour with sad comedians.
Yep.
But yeah, when we did that, I want to say like almost right around there and onward from that was when I started really feeling the pandemic finally caught up with me. And I was still working out, but for whatever reason, I think, it just starts getting darker out. Sun starts going down earlier. It gets colder. It just seemed like, the beginning of a shitty tunnel that we're not even inside of yet,
I know. And we got lucky because that was one of the last good days of November. And then
it was like super warm out. Yeah.
Weren't you guys like in like polo shirts or something?
Oh yeah, we were like beautiful.
Oh, I was probably, I don't know what I was wearing. I don't remember.
You skateboarded over there and like
I took a longboard. Yeah, it was such a nice day.
And
I think it was the end of October as well. When we were filming Matt for the doc just outside Beyond the Pale. Like we were all sweating. Like by the time it was done, like his face, like it was like plus 22 or something like that. It was really
even this winter has been pretty mild so far. We've had a couple of really cold days, but we've had so much sunshine. That's what I love the most about this winter so far. That's the thing I need the most. Even if you're not getting as much vitamin D because it's further away or whatever, it's still just, I don't know, something's motivating about a nice blue sky, even if it's...
Well, a lot of what it is too is it's negative ions, right? I mean, negative ions that are produced from the sun, and you get it from a lot of things too, like running water and stuff, helps to elevate your mood, right? So when you have a lack of negative ions, which is kind of funny because you think you need positive ions for that, but it's actually negative ions. And that's one of the reasons too why people are going to typically have more depression in the wintertime.
Yeah, well, it blows.
Yeah,
it's definitely.
Well, hey, at least you guys don't have a fucking curfew.
Well, yeah. Oh my God, that's got to be brutal. But
yeah,
what JF was saying, like, I haven't had a hard time with fitness for the most part. I have my lazy days here and there, but meditation is the one I'm really trying to get my head around at this, or my head into, however you want to say that. I've been practicing a little bit, but I do find it kind of difficult to just quiet your thought patterns when you're, I don't know, there's just so much going on in the world right now. And everything is so weird and different that I definitely find it's hard to quiet down my thoughts and get to that calm Zen spot, I want to though.
You need it the most is when there's a lot,
Oh, I know. Yeah. I don't know. I'm not the worst off. I've had a couple good meditation sessions where I felt like I was getting there, and really starting to feel more normal. Because if you haven't done it for a long time, it feels so foreign. And that's a bad thing, because when it becomes a natural part of your process, it's people get into like a flow state and just, you be your best version of yourself almost. So I really want to be like, Bruce Lee style, like just really master that shit.
Yeah, and like when I talk about meditation with people, is like sometimes it's daunting, like because you think you have to clear your mind, but you're not going to be able to clear your mind. Like you're not a monk, you're not gonna, you're surrounded by all this stuff. You're not a cave anywhere. Like so, the best you can do in our society is probably just let the thoughts pass without attaching yourself and chasing after them. You know, you're still gonna like meditate.
Dude, I just heard the coolest analogy by this some sort of medical doctor who specializes in anxiety. I'm sorry, I can't remember his name at the moment, but it was like let go of the banana, and it said, imagine there's like a monkey with a clear glass in front of him, and there's some holes there with bananas on the other side, and the holes are only big enough for him to get his hand through. But as soon as he's holding on the banana, he can't pull out. So eventually the hunter catches him because he refuses to let go of the banana. So if you can just learn to let go of the banana, you can be free, you know?
Yeah. Well, that's a whole.
That was a lot like the ending of the Indiana Jones.
Well, maybe they took it from that. I don't know who's the originator.
What came first, the Holy Grail or the banana?
Yeah. Well, yeah, but I don't know. It could be like an old philosophical, adage or whatever. I'm not sure.
And it's very true. You know, a matter of fact, I mean, like I recently, I've just had a lot of residual stuff from a previous relationship, which I think, if anything, was more even just based on like wanting to make sure that like she was okay. You know, like I just kind of felt like there was just this thing between me being like worried about her because of like wanting her to like land on her feet and just make sure that, you know, because of the pandemic, you know, it just delayed stuff for her financially and whatever too. And, and it just was kind of like, it was just hard for me to realize, like, you know, it's not, that's not my problem, but like, what's the point in worrying about something that's out of my control? You know, I can't do anything about it. You know, we've moved on, but I just kind of kept feeling like it was just kind of like holding on to me a little bit of just this sense of just, I don't know, you can maybe call it even like unconditional love in a way. But so I think when it was kind of, I got a bit of to a clearing on that, where I was able to kind of finally give myself some closure and realize like, hey, you know what, like she's doing pretty good, you know, and I'm happy and proud of her, which is nice. But at the same time, like, you know, there's no point in thinking about it just because it doesn't do anything. And from doing so, it just really helped, again, elevate my mood, also better sleep. And you know, it's kind of like that old adage, you know, if you, with the butterfly, you know, let it go.
Oh no, I've never heard that. Just don't catch butterflies?
I don't know. Something like if you
go chasing waterfalls. That's what you're thinking.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Oh man, that's hilarious. Shit, I'm only noticing the time now. We've been going at this for a while, so I'm gonna have to wrap it up soon. I gotta go help out with the kid, but I want to ask you guys what I've been asking everybody at the end of these, which is for this season, which is if you could have dinner with somebody that you've never met before, alive or dead, who would it be and why? From any time period, doesn't matter, but it could be someone that's still alive right now, if that's what you prefer.
So that just reminds me of Anthony Jeselnik. He's like, all right, he's awesome. This chick's just like, well, if you could have dinner with anybody like that, alive or dead, who would it be? And he's like, Caligula. And she's like, really? You wouldn't choose me? And he's like, okay, yes, I would choose you and you'd be dead. I'd probably say, I don't know. It'd be kind of a toss up between, I want to say Dwayne Johnson. I just think like being around him would just be phenomenal. You know, you can just learn. And Barack Obama, same thing. I just feel like their energy and their presence is just so fantastic. But I would also kind of say like Hitler, but like before he went crazy.
What? I thought you were gonna say to kill him or something. He's like.
Poison him. Yeah, you could put poison arsenic in his wine, you know? Yeah.
No, I'm saying, but think about how Hitler, he went evil, but think about like.
So you mean you would try to like talk him into like a more positive mindset and maybe he would
I think
not
just
start the Nazi regime?
Before that evil set in, I think that he was a very brilliant man. You know, I mean, like most people cannot accomplish world domination and he was like this close. Like he's obviously a smart guy. And that's why like if you compare him to the other ones is, the other two are not evil, but so I was saying, if you get him before he that switch went off, I feel like there's a lot you could learn from that guy.
I guess I thought, like, do you think he would, if you went at the right point and you stopped him from becoming so disgruntled and angry and full of hate, do you think he would have like done something great for the planet?
I think so. I think he had
global warming or something.
If he had the capabilities that he had, you know, but he put them in the right way, that guy would have done great things. You know, it completely would have changed the world.
This feels like so weird. It's like, and welcome back to complimenting Hitler. This is bananas, but okay. No, I mean, it would be interesting, I'm sure, at the very least. But I don't know that I feel like I would want to punch the guy the second we sat down, or take him out,
Yeah.
I think the liability of him becoming what he became would be always outweigh the possibility of, oh no, we saved him. Yeah, we changed his attitude. He's cool. Don't worry. No, Adolf's cool now. He's cool. Don't worry about it.
You'd have to pretend that
he committed genocide. I don't think there is any way that you can not have that at least sort of in you. Maybe not from like when you're a baby, but I would say that has to strike in your youth at some point to really set its claws into you. It seems weird to me for someone to be like 30 and be like, I'm feeling evil and kind of murdery now. Like, I don't know. I don't think that happens. And maybe if you're driven to the edge, I guess, but it seems a lot less likely than someone just having something wrong in their brain where they've got the serial killer gene or whatever,
Yeah. No, I'm obviously kidding. Hitler would not be in my top 3.
Just taking it out, retracting that statement. You're going to get canceled now, man. You're going to get canceled. People are going to say that you're a Hitler supporter because you want to have dinner with him. Pre-evil Hitler. We got to stress that. We can't stress that hard enough. But again, I would, it's an interesting thing to wonder about people like that. And like, have they always been that way to some level? Like the nature versus nurture argument, essentially, I suppose. But it's so extreme with somebody like that, because you got to.
Well, hey, they made a movie about it in Deadpool 2, What
do you mean?
Well, that's like the whole premise. Go back in time.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, my bad. The time travel with Cable. Yeah. That's true. Would you kill baby Hitler? If that was the only point the time machine could land, they're like, yeah, we got you in front of him. We can take him out, but he's a fucking 6-month-old baby. He doesn't have that little fucking mustache yet.
Yeah.
Goo goo gaga. Can you do it?
I don't know. I mean, like, I don't know if I would do it, but I'd probably support it,
It's a messed up question. I don't expect you to answer, but it's something I've heard comics talk about before. And it's definitely a valid, like, what the fuck kind of question to think about. As much as I don't want to think about doing a horrible thing like that, it's like, you could save so many lives. You know, you could save millions of lives. I don't know.
That should be one of your questions at the end of the podcast. Like, would you save 6 million lives, but you have to kill one baby? Would you?
The baby's Hitler.
It's a great, mood to end the episodes on. Oh my God. But sorry, JF, I am interested still in who you would want to have dinner with.
Yeah, not Hitler. I was thinking about because a lot of famous people, but I think my great grandfather, who I've never met, and I heard what I've heard from my dad is he was considered to be like a philosopher in his town, and he was so. I was telling my dad how I've been doing hot cold shower because it helps with my temperature regulation, and I don't feel cold for the rest of the day because it brings warmth to blood circulation to your extremities and all that. And he was like, "Oh yeah, my grandfather, so your great grandfather used to every morning in the winter would go walk barefoot outside, take snow, rub it on his hands, and then come inside and warm himself. And then he would say that he would never get cold, he would never get cold hand or feet. So he was doing hot, cold showers. He was I don't want to say my great grandfather's was the Wim Hof of his times, but I feel like he might have been super interesting kind of guy to talk to, and I think it'd be cool to talk with one of your relatives or one of your great grandfathers or something. I mean, I could say.
No, but seeing your lineage for sure. Yeah, that would be really interesting. Assuming they could speak the same language, because who knows where your lineage might go. But I think it'd be cool, even to meet someone further back, 300 years, someone that you haven't even heard stories about, but man, I only exist because of you. And
well, so I did some genealogy, and I lived in Paris for a summer, and so my great grandfather's from Normandy, France. So I would be able to speak the language, I could speak French to him, but he was born in 1608 in Normandy. Wow. And I actually traveled to Normandy, and I went to the original town where he was from. It was a small town called Saint-Marguerite-de-l'Hôtel, and I met the mayor of that town, and I told him my story. I was looking for my grandfather's birth certificate, and we actually went through the archives together. He brought me home to, he his wife made me dinner and all that. It was like this big, it felt like a family reunion. It felt like a long lost cousin or something that I never met before. And I actually saw like some tombstones with my last name on it from the people that stay there. But he was the first one to come to Canada in 1630s, and he's the only one from my lineage that was the one that came to Canada. It's like all the Frenettes in Canada are all from this one guy.
Wow.
And I would love to hear his story, because that must be a weird kind of story. Like he was 30 something or 20 something, whatever, and came to Canada just on a boat and like, you know,
That's insane.
So yeah, I would love to meet that guy. That'd be cool.
Yeah, genealogy is really interesting. My mom got really into that. I don't know. She's been doing it forever now, but she like went, same thing. She went back to like England or places where her roots were and met with distant relatives. And in one case, I think she was trying to locate someone's ashes that had been buried at the wrong spot. So they were trying to like set things right and put it where it was supposed to be or something like that. So yeah, I definitely think that's really cool. And the older you get, the more you become interested in history. I think that's, personally speaking, I didn't really care when I was in high school. I remember thinking history was kind of cool, like, oh, the pyramids, and you know, there was some stuff I was kind of interested in. But now I catch myself all the time on YouTube, like watching historical footage of like New York in 1916 or like weird shit like that. I just like seeing humans from other time periods and like how they acted and behaved, and just realizing that in the video that you're watching, it's the present moment for them, and everything is the most modern right now, like thing it could possibly be. But I don't know, it's just cool to look into the past, and I really appreciate that more the older that I get.
Oh yeah, for sure. I'm reading, one of the books I'm reading right now is called 1491, and it's the year pre-Columbus, and the whole book is about the Americas before Columbus, and it's like the super detailed. Cool. Like they have like conversations from the, like, you know, accounts from the Incas and everything like that, and you know, and what America looked like from the First Nations perspective before Columbus came and, you know, screwed everything up. But it's like, yeah, stuff like that I wouldn't have never been in high school. Yeah, I was probably too high in history class to even care, to like, oh, whatever. But yeah.
I was just watching a video on the 7 wonders of the ancient world, of which only one still exists, and it's like the Great Pyramid at Giza. But the rest of them are all super interesting and impressive, and you know, they're just drawings and people's interpretations because they don't have photos. But it's really cool. Like one of them is the Colossus of Rhodes, which was this like huge dude that they built over the archway of like a seaport that would have stood like, I don't even know how tall. I'm not going to try and paraphrase that because I don't remember, but I don't know. Shit like that just really cranks my gears these days. I don't know why.
Yeah, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon.
Yeah. That's the one that they debate may not have actually ever existed.
Yeah, who knows?
It could have just been.
I think it's a little funny that, you know, all these English and French come over and we, you know, decide to take over the land, and then what we introduced to the Native Americans was horseback riding. It's like that was something that they didn't naturally do, right? So
really,
we actually had these like really shitty primitive weapons, like muskets and stuff. The advantage was that we rode horses. We teach all the Native Americans to ride horses. Obviously, they became a million times better at it. Yeah. And then they had fucking bow and arrows, and then they just started slaughtering all the Brits. It was like, well played.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was their place, you know?
Yeah.
What else?
But it's kind of like you're like, they're teaching them something and they're like, wait a second. And it's like they just turn around and like use it against them. It's kind of like, yeah.
I didn't know that. I would have assumed that they had already figured.
Yeah, I think it was the Apaches. I remember hearing about there's a book about it. I forget the name of it, but Joe Rogan was talking about it on his podcast and a little bit about their history and yeah, just basically how they just like really like just slaughtered. Like it was a pretty big bloodbath of a war where they were able to make up for a lot of the bloodshed that had previously happened. And then of course, I guess it leveled out as the Brits' weaponry improved or something, but
shit.
That's why I'm scared. Like my last name is Brown. Like, although like my direct ancestry, like my dad moved here from England when in his 30s. So like all my dad's family's like back in England, except for my great aunt. She lives in Ontario. But I like when I gonna go back like 100, 200, 300 years, I'm like, I'm pretty sure there's probably a lot of like slave owners or something in my family lineage or something. So, but it's really hard to trace, like for me to do my genealogy with my last name. Like it's hard.
And like, wouldn't most people, if you go far enough back, I would think most people in North America around that time, that if they were white, they probably had slaves, especially in the US. But I think probably Canada too. I don't know the history behind that, but I would assume, that was going on here too to some degree.
But I mean, I think like mine's more like, oh yeah, my ancestors just went around the world and pretended like it was theirs, and they probably went to India and took over, and just like that. That's what the Brits did back in that.
Yeah, the British were just like making everything.
They just showed up and were like, we're going to stay here for a while.
That's crazy. Talking about the world, I just watched some video that I thought was super crazy where it was explaining how like all the maps that we use, because of the Earth being a sphere, that they have to kind of choose the best version of a map that they can do to represent everything. But the one that we use, which I don't remember what it's called, but the main sort of one that most people use for Google Maps and all that, it's very, very inaccurate when it comes to the sizes of things. So like they show that like Greenland, when you see it on this map, it looks huge, but you can fit Greenland into Africa like 20 times or something like that. Like what is the other one? Indonesia, all the islands there that are kind of stretched out, they stretch across like the continental US. Like it's mind blowing. I just didn't realize any of that. Yeah, you should really check it out. I thought that was the raddest stuff.
Yeah, I remember seeing all the distortions of that. Yeah.
Yeah, like it's not accurate at all in some cases, which is, but they have.
Well, you're also forgetting the part too, where like you get to the edge of the Earth.
Oh God, don't even get me started on flat Earth. Jeez.
That's a whole different discussion. Yeah.
I can't even believe that shit with the ice wall crust like a big pizza.
You know what though? I do like.
This is where JF is like, you guys, you know what? I looked into it and actually.
But I like sometimes that people come up with these stupid movements that make us sort of question what we know. Because, how do you know the Earth is round? And then you have to like start Googling like, oh yeah, shadows in the sun and all that. Like, also, you forgot about like physics or like, geometry or whatever. And then you're like, oh yeah, I just assume I knew these things, but I don't really understand how these things work. Like and then you start talking to people, they're like all these crazy, like talking about anti-vaxxers, and you're like, yeah, vaccines are good. And they're like, well, why are they good? And you're like, oh shit, I have to start looking into it. And the studies are showing that blah, blah, cure polio. Like,
the problem is some people won't look into the studies, or they'll try, they won't understand it, and then they'll just form their own conclusions and be like, no, Earth is just flat, like it just is. Or they'll hear facts that are wrong. But I get what you're saying. Like, how do you know, unless you're a scientist or a mathematician or whatever the case is with said conspiracy that you're wondering about, you never really can prove unless you do some serious research. And even then you're kind of still trusting that the people that did the research know what they're talking about,
Yeah. But I mean, like, I think they're trolls almost. They're like triggering our minds. Like it's almost like we're becoming too complacent. We're just believing everything. So flat earthers are like a kind of a moment of like, okay, whoa, what is this?
It's sparking curiosity again.
Are you calling Bill Nye the science guy a liar?
No.
I don't know. I feel like 99% of all that stuff that I know came from him. That's all, like literally.
Oh, I thought you were saying he was a flat earther. I'm like, no way.
No. I mean, like, in terms of you're talking about like where like everything that I would typically resource was like, that and like stuff in school. But like, I felt like, hey, if Bill Nye said it was true, of course it was true.
I know he's an atheist. I heard something of him talking about how
of course he would be an atheist. I think a lot of scientists.
There are spiritual scientists out there, maybe less of them, but I've heard that there are some people who still, follow a certain religion, but then they're still people of science as well. I also agree. It seems like those things would clash a lot, but hey, power to them, whatever.
Well, is that restraining order still intact?
For what?
Just a little Simpsons reference.
Oh, I didn't get it. My bad.
There's one where there's a restraining order put on science and religion. They have to stay away from each other, like something like 500 meters.
That's hilarious.
That's good.
Yeah, I've been seeing a lot of people arguing online about The Simpsons that like only the first 8 seasons are good. And I don't know. I would say maybe there was a decline in quality, but I feel like a lot of those people are being extra nostalgic because I've watched some random seasons later on and they're different, but I think they've done a good job at adapting and trying to stay sort of modern. And, like if you watch, it's true. If you watch an episode of The Simpsons now versus, the first 10 seasons, it kind of feels a bit different, but shouldn't it if it's been on for that long,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, I mean, like just like any show, especially when you consider the change in writers, but I feel like the first 10 seasons always get that rap, but it's like if you take somebody who's never seen The Simpsons before and you introduce them to all The Simpsons, their opinion would be different. But like we grew up on those first 10 cents. So it's like, that's where I think.
That's what I mean. I think not to say that those aren't great episodes, because they really are. And there definitely are some stinkers later on. I guess the long-winded point I'm making is that I've been surprised finding myself laughing really hard at some of the newer stuff that I've seen some of these Facebook groups where people are so like hardcore against, everything after season 8 is fucking terrible. It's like, there's still a lot of good humor in there, you know?
You should actually go on that podcast for it's called Purple Monkey Dishwasher that Al Babcock has.
Yeah, I've seen that.
83 comedy. Yeah, it's a lot of fun because you just basically get all these Simpsons buffs talk about their favorite episode and talk about Simpsons. And so, I mean, if you're a Simpsons guy,
I love Simpsons. Yeah, I don't know how much I've watched like every episode, because probably after season 12 or something is when I think I started just growing up and doing other shit, and I didn't have the time to watch it every Sunday night anymore or whatever. But I would like to go on that podcast because I definitely feel like I know enough about The Simpsons to have some good points. And picking a favorite episode would be really friggin' hard, though.
Yeah,
I don't know. There's so many good ones. I like a lot of the Sideshow Bob ones. I always found those pretty funny.
The Cape Fear one. I like, when you watch back movies and you watch the old episodes where they literally like remake a movie into a Simpsons episode. I think that was brilliant, that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah, they had the greatest references. Simpsons, it really has had a lot of golden eras back. I guess the earliest ones are kind of the best, but I don't know if I could pick a favorite episode. That seems like really, really hard. Because the Halloween ones are great too.
Yeah, I was gonna say all the Halloween, the shooting.
I mean, I probably can't think of them off the top of the head. Frank Grimes, that's a great one.
Oh yeah,
I like when Homer goes to space too. There's so many. I could probably like just sit here and list them dozens of them.
It really is one of the best shows, man. Like it really is. You know,
so many great characters.
Still, it holds up. It really holds up.
Yeah, well, I guess that's a weird tangent to end this podcast. I don't even know how I went down the Simpsons hole, but
flying theme. Everybody's,
Hey, what other podcast goes from Hitler to Flat Earth to Simpsons? That's all I'm gonna say.
We talked about some interesting stuff for sure. It definitely felt like a chill session, and I'm glad to be able to talk to you guys. And everyone who's watching this should, if you're watching it on the day it came out, then come out to Yuck Yucks tonight and see the first of 2 premiere nights for Comedy 19, The Last Laugh. It's a really cool documentary with a lot of cool opinions from comedians and people who are really involved in the industry. And I don't know, I just think people are really going to dig it because it was really well done. And I'm impressed with your work, and I'm really eager to see what you come out with in the future too, both of you guys, because you're both super talented people. So thanks a lot. And yeah, sorry we didn't get time to do the music stuff we talked about before. We just talked for like 2 hours. I gotta return to my family. But I would love to collaborate with you on something musical, man.
Yeah, I would love to jam sometimes.
It'll be easier post-COVID, obviously, to get together. Oh, and Scott, you're a musician as well. Yeah. We'll come up with something, maybe a comedy song we all do together or something. Anyways.
Be dope, man. Thanks so much.
Thanks a lot for taking the time to talk with me, and I'll see you guys on Monday or tonight. All right. Peace out.
All right. Bye.